Floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, yikes. All these natural disasters can get extremely dangerous, but we're kind of familiar with them. But how about a natural disaster that has never happened before, but could occur any moment now? It might be a super eruption. That's what happens when a supervolcano erupts. You might know that Yellowstone Park is located on top of a supervolcano. The last massive eruption there happened about 664,000 years ago, and the one before that, approximately 1.3 million years ago. If we do the math, we'll understand that the next eruption might be due anytime soon. There's no strong evidence that the supervolcano is waking up or preparing for an eruption, but what would it be like if it did happen? Months before the eruption, small-scale earthquakes would become more frequent and more powerful in the area. Not long before the eruption, the growing pressure would push up the ground over the volcano, creating a dome. Narrow cracks would open along the edges of this dome. The magma would then start rising toward the surface, and then the eruption would kick off. A massive column of lava and ash would shoot up into the air to a height of over 16 miles. The volcano would keep pumping ash for days on end. The air in that area would heat up to 570 degrees Fahrenheit. For all living creatures, ash fallout would be one of the most dangerous consequences of the eruption. Buildings and trees would start collapsing under the weight of this dense substance. It would only take a couple of days for a 10-foot layer of ash to cover the territory of about 50 miles around the center of the eruption. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures all over the world would start to drop. The eruption would also be rich in sulfur, and this element is an effective sun blocker. That's why it would soon get so cold that there would be no summer in the whole world for the next several years. The monsoon seasons would change. It would be hard for animals to find food and clean water. Well now, how about a gamma ray burst? You don't stumble across this kind of radiation in your everyday life. A gamma ray burst occurs when two neutron stars collide. The collapse of a massive star can produce it too. Gamma rays could present a serious danger to Earth. If a gamma ray burst happened close to our home planet, it could rip our ozone layer away. After that, we would be left unprotected from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Plus, gamma rays could also produce ground ozone. This kind of ozone could seep into the ocean since it's water-soluble, and that would lead to a mass extinction of marine life. Plants wouldn't survive this disaster either. Now, come to think of it, giant sinkholes could swallow entire communities. One of such sinkholes opened up in the city of New York. It pulled a parked van into the earth. That happened in the summer of 2022. And it wasn't the only sinkhole to appear in that area. Local inhabitants reported about 4,000 sinkholes all over the city. This kind of problem is also very common in Florida, and it's much more serious than it may sound. Sinkholes open all of a sudden, pulling down everything and everyone that happens to be nearby. Sinkholes appear all over the world, which makes them a global problem. They're totally unpredictable and form without warning. Luckily, experts know what causes them. In some areas, there are vast areas of groundwater. But during droughts, this water dries up. This creates large empty caverns, and after heavy rains, the surface over such a cavern can collapse, creating a sinkhole within minutes. Now, what if we came across a wandering black hole? You might know that a black hole is a region in space where gravity is so powerful that not even light can escape its clutches. Luckily, the nearest one to us is 1,500 light-years away. Nothing to worry about, right? Until you find out about wandering black holes. Now, things get definitely way creepier. If such a black hole entered the solar system, Earth would be doomed. We wouldn't stand a chance against this space monster. In 2012, 13 wandering black holes were spotted not so far away from our planet. But worry not. Not far away, in space terms, means around 1 billion light-years away. So we've got some time left. Plus, the possibility of such a disaster is very, very low. Another natural disaster we haven't experienced yet is a mega flood. It's never happened before, but the changes in climate do make for a risky potential. It could start, let's say, in California. This state experienced some really bad flooding in the past. One of such floods stretched up to 60 miles across and 300 miles long. If a similar disaster happened these days, it would cause $1 trillion worth of damage. It would also uproot millions of people. Now let's talk about a hypercane. Judging from the name, this natural disaster might get extreme. A hypercane is a theoretical hurricane of unsurpassed power. It would occur if the ocean became overheated as a result of climate change, or because of a massive volcanic eruption. In any case, these conditions could create a hurricane that would stretch way beyond the lower stratosphere. And as you may guess, regular hurricanes don't do that. The hypercane speed would reach 500 miles per hour. The pressure inside would be low enough not to let the hypercane to wear out as quickly as other hurricanes. The hypercane could last for weeks on end. But the worst thing? It could damage or even destroy part of Earth's ozone layer, and the hole could be the size of the entire North American continent. Now, this disaster did happen before. About 66 million years ago. I bet you know what I'm hinting at. Yep, that very meteor that supposedly wiped out dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. This 7-mile-wide space visitor was traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. As a result of the collision, 75% of all life on the planet disappeared, and winter reigned on Earth for 18 months. Want to know a secret? Meteors strike Earth all the time. Even more of them barely miss our planet. But it's also very hard to predict meteor strikes. Scientists miss a lot of them until they just nearly miss us. That's why experts are working on an early warning system that could prevent disasters. It could make meteor impacts less catastrophic, or at least allow people time to evacuate. It could also be our very own sun that would be responsible for another natural disaster. I'm talking about a massive solar flare. On the scale of damage to society, few catastrophes can compare to this event. It wouldn't destroy buildings like a tsunami or an earthquake. Neither would it end lives in the same way a supervolcano or meteor would. But it would cripple our entire way of life by destroying the whole electronic infrastructure of Earth. The cost of this disaster would reach trillions of dollars. It'd cause other infrastructures to fail. Communication, medicine, transportation, banking systems, those would tumble like dominoes, and it would be incredibly hard to recover them. Earth would be left without electricity for years. There would be no electric light, no computers, no phones. Water supply systems would be out of order. There would be no food in supermarkets. There would be no electricity, and people wouldn't be able to reboot the already broken power grids. In 1859, people all over the world woke up in the middle of the night. It was as light as during the day. The skies were illuminated with auroras, red, green, purple. They appeared even in the regions where no one had seen them before, like the Bahamas, Jamaica, or Hawaii. Telegraphs got electrically charged, even though they were disconnected. In many areas, fires started. That was when technology barely existed. But imagine the avalanche of problems a solar flare could cause today. My, it's wet out here. In 2016, scientists decided to study the widest part of the Atlantic Ocean, between Africa and South America. It's kind of lonely there. They went days without seeing a single plane or ship. It was mostly just dolphins and whales swimming by. They were in the middle of nowhere. So why? They were floating right above one of the most important geological spots on Earth, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's where two monster tectonic plates meet. Tectonic plates are massive jigsaw pieces that are constantly moving, even though we usually can't feel them. They form the Earth's crust and, in this case, meet beneath the Atlantic Ocean. The researchers floated over the ridge and dropped down some instruments that detect waves, earthquakes, and other vibrations. A year later, they came back to collect the results. At first, the goal was to learn more about the history of the two plates. But the instruments picked up a whole lot more than that. They found out some stuff about the future, too. Way down at the bottom, there's a layer of extremely hot liquid rock that's constantly rising up, pushing on the tectonic plates and causing them to move apart from each other. That means that the Atlantic Ocean is expanding about 2 inches every year, pushing Europe and Africa away from the Americas. At the same time, its bigger neighbor, the Pacific Ocean, is shrinking. It's the biggest ocean, right now, with a huge area that's around 30% of the Earth's surface. Its average depth is 13,000 feet and is home to the famous Mariana Trench, the deepest spot in any ocean. And yeah, it's now shrinking by around 1/5 of a square mile per year. Some scientists even believe that eventually, millions and millions of years from now, the Pacific Ocean could completely disappear. This ocean is where we think most earthquakes happen, plus it's where a lot of the world's volcanoes are. All that causes lots of shaking. Plates move around and old parts of the Earth's crust get destroyed. The ocean floor can't grow fast enough to replace it. This means some big changes are coming in the future. A couple of inches isn't exactly a big deal, but after a few 100 million years, there'll probably be a new supercontinent on Earth. Australia is slowly heading north, and it could eventually collide with Korea, Japan, and eastern China. Africa is moving too. In 50 million years, it'll be pushing right up against the southern parts of Europe. Since it's all happening so slowly, I've had a chance to think up some future scenarios. Okay, not me. A bunch of super brainy scientists with even brainier computers. The first scenario, a monster landmass called Novo. The Americas would slam into Antarctica, then they'd team up and head over to Africa. Meanwhile, Africa would have already smashed into Europe and Asia. Not bad, at least you'd save some money on plane tickets. But for most people, it would take an epic road trip to get to a beach somewhere. The second scenario is Ultima. I feel like these all sound like car names. Anyway, in this scenario, the Atlantic stops getting wider. Actually, it's the opposite. It starts closing in on itself. This new super cool continent would be surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Scenario 3. Orica. Both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans eventually shrink down until they either disappear or end up like tiny little lakes. All the life in these two oceans is gone. Instead, some new ocean starts forming to replace them. And the new supercontinent? It has Australia in the corner, with the Americans and East Asia each on the opposite side of a small puddle that used to be the Pacific. The rest of the planet is one big unexplored super ocean inhabited by… who knows? I won't be around then. Number 4. Amasia. There's that car thing again. This one predicts Africa, Australia, and all the continents except Antarctica start moving north. Sorry, Antarctica, even planet Earth keeps forgetting about you. Better luck next time. Well, way off in the future, it might be possible to take a big old road trip across every continent, or drive across the African-South American border, or even get to Australia without having to take the longest flight of your life. But we've got a while to wait. What should I do for the next 250 million years? Binge watch some Brightside? Tectonic plates move at different speeds, some slower, some slightly faster. Your hair and fingernails actually grow at roughly the same speed as these beasts move. Imagine if everyone lived on one of those supercontinents. Animals would finally be able to cross continents and meet species they've never seen before. Leopards, rhinos, lions, elephants. Imagine if they got curious enough to set out on a journey out of their habitat. A lion might meet a polar bear. Kangaroos could finally leave the land down under, and birds that migrate to warmer places would have to totally reorganize their travel schedules. Who knows what the climate would be like? Playing around with the continental jigsaw puzzle isn't exactly a new thing. Our world didn't always look like this. 300 million years ago, our planet didn't have 7 continents. It had only one, a supercontinent called Pangaea. Pangaea was surrounded by only one ocean. Over time, it slowly started falling apart. At one point, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and Africa were one unit, and North America and Eurasia were another. Over time, these continents also splintered off, each heading in its own direction. Scientists have discovered many similar plants and animal fossils on continents that are separated by huge oceans. Even when you just glance at a map, you can see how Africa and South America look like two massive puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly. When you look at all the oceans and seas on a map, it may look like they just flow right into each other, like there's only one big ocean and people gave different names to different parts. You wouldn't think that if you've ever been to the place where they meet. The Atlantic and Pacific have a strict border that looks like an invisible wall separating two completely different worlds. You can clearly see different colors and waters, and they don't mix. Of course, there's no wall or any actual physical border, but not all water's the same. The Pacific and Atlantic have different densities, amounts of salt, temperatures, and a whole bunch of differences. The borders that separate two bodies of water are called ocean clines. The line you see dividing the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean is mostly caused by different salt levels. This is what layers of water with different salt levels look like. It's like they're separated with cling film, each one with a different color because it has different things growing in it. To see a clear, noticeable border, one sea or ocean has to be a whole lot saltier than the other. Want to get active and use up all the salt in your house? Pour some colored salty water or seawater into a glass bowl. Then add fresh water on top. Voila! The Pacific Ocean is the less salty one. That's because there are loads more rivers flowing into it. Heavier liquids are heavy, so they should sink to the bottom. But then, why is the border between the Atlantic and Pacific a vertical line and not a horizontal one? First, the difference in density of these two salty beasts may be enough to stop them from mixing, but it's not really enough to send one of them to the bottom with the other floating above it. There's another reason, and it's all about the Earth spinning around. Say you're flying from Chile to New England. If you fly straight north, by the time you get there, the Earth will have turned a bit, and you'd be nowhere near your destination. To get to the right place, the pilot needs to fly in a bit of a curve. That's sort of the same reason that currents move around in different directions. The currents in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans move away from each other, so they don't really mix at their border, even though they're both just water. Confused? Yeah, me too. Now, you might want to book your dream vacation to Miami Beach as soon as you can, because this whole area might be underwater in the next 75 years. But it's not just Florida. Parts of Louisiana, California, and Washington are also expected to be among the first American states affected by sea level rise. If you live in the United States, you can check for yourself whether your address is on the list of cities that will disappear. Just search for Sea Level Rise Viewer on Google. That will take you to a tool created by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it helps us visualize what coastal flooding might look like in the future. Now, you see that dark area in blue? Those are the sinking cities of the U.S., and by that, I mean cities that could be submerged by 2100. That's in the worst-case scenario, if ocean levels were to rise by as much as 10 feet. Hopefully, it won't come to that. As you probably know by now, sea levels are going up because the Earth is getting warmer. When the planet heats up, ice at the North and South poles melts, and all that extra water flows into the oceans. Plus, warmer water expands and takes up more space. So between the melting ice and the expanding oceans, sea levels slowly rise over time. And that means more flooding and even the possibility of some cities ending up underwater. Right now, statistics show that sea levels are expected to rise by around 6 feet by the year 2100. The problem is that this could cause major coastal flooding, and not just during storms or heavy rains. Even on clear days, some areas could end up underwater. And that brings us to a question. How do we actually know how high ocean waters are? These days, experts can measure sea level with incredible accuracy, thanks to satellite altimeters. That's basically a special type of radar that measures how high something is. It figures out the height of the ocean by timing how long it takes for a radar pulse to travel from the satellite down to the surface of the sea and then bounce back. When scientists combine that data with the satellite's exact location, they can map even the tiniest changes in sea level all over the world. Right now, coastal flooding predictions are showing us something serious. The rate of global sea level rise has doubled over the past 3 decades. And there are plenty of tools online that help us to visualize just how big this problem could become in the future. The Sea Level Rise Viewer I mentioned earlier focuses on areas within the United States. But if you don't live there, you can still check if your address might be in danger. Just look up the interactive map from Climate Central. If you set the water level to 10 feet above the high tide line, you'll see that a lot of countries could be seriously affected. Let's take a look at South America. In Argentina, for example, rising waters could flood many parts of Buenos Aires province. Head over to Brazil, and you'll see that a lot of cities, including Rio de Janeiro, would be affected. We might have to say goodbye to that iconic wave-patterned sidewalk along Copacabana Beach, and both of the city's airports would be flooded too. Things don't look much better in Europe. Major cities like Lisbon in Portugal, Valencia in Spain, and Rome in Italy could end up partly underwater. Honestly, the worst situation in Europe is probably in the Netherlands. Right now, about a quarter of the country is literally below sea level, and nearly half of it sits just 3 feet above. So if sea levels rise, they are facing some serious risks. This entire red zone, which includes cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, would be below the surface if the ocean rose by 10 feet. Fortunately, the Netherlands is probably the country with the most experience in fighting back against the sea. For years, they have tackled the threat with massive infrastructure, things like giant canals, windmills, and dikes, all designed to manage the water. And thanks to their efforts, the Dutch have reclaimed about 20% of their land from the sea. That's right, they're actually expanding. Unfortunately, some countries are at much higher risk than others. According to estimates, about 5 of them are in serious danger of disappearing in the near future. First up is Fiji, a tropical paradise loved by tourists. This nation is in a tough spot because of its low-lying landscape. There, extreme warming could cause sea levels to rise by as much as 6 feet by the year 2100. It doesn't help the fact that Fiji sits right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where massive storms can quickly turn things into chaos. That means people there need to brace themselves for more frequent flooding, and they're already taking action. To protect against coastal erosion, some communities are lining the seashore with old tires to keep sand from washing away in stronger waves. Others are planting mangroves across the coast. These trees can reduce the height of waves hitting the shore by an average of 31%. Plus, they help cut down wind speeds, which really matters during cyclones. Next on the red list is Vanuatu. This chain of islands, located between Australia and Fiji, could be underwater sooner than we think, and they're already making changes. Vanuatu was one of the first Pacific nations to relocate an entire community to safer ground. Back in 2005, people living in vulnerable areas on the North Island of Tegua moved to higher land. With temperatures continuing to rise, they're bracing for even more intense tropical cyclones. That means heavier rainfall, more flooding, and a much higher risk to both homes and infrastructure. The Marshall Islands are also facing a serious risk. This country is home to around 39,000 people and lives on the opposite side of the world from the United Kingdom. It's an extremely low-lying island nation built on what's basically a coral reef. According to NASA, sea levels there have risen by almost 4 inches over the past 30 years, and they could rise by about 7.5 inches over the next 30. And that's no small thing. If nothing is done, the islands could face more than 100 days of flooding every year by the end of the century. People over there are afraid of losing their homes. Studies also show that up to 40% of the buildings in the capital city, Majuro, could end up underwater in the future. But this country isn't ready to give up, and they're reinforcing the infrastructure. The Solomon Islands are also being slowly swallowed by the sea. This region has been experiencing sea level rise at nearly 3 times the global average. Over the years, satellite images have shown that 5 vegetated reef islands have already vanished beneath the waves. On the bright side, the people there are working hard to protect their homes. They're building stone walls along the coast and planting mangroves to hold back the water. But the worst case might be Tuvalu, as it could become the first country to turn completely uninhabitable because of rising seas. This island chain, located about halfway between Australia and Hawaii, sits only about 9 feet above sea level. And in its narrowest spot, in a place called Fungafale, the land is just about 65 feet wide. You can see how vulnerable the situation is, right? I mean, even before the higher tides arrive, the country's limited farmland could be affected by salt water. These islands are a powerful example of resilience, and a reminder that sinking cities don't have to mean disappearing ones. While the challenges are real, the global response to sea level rise is growing stronger every day. Around the world, communities are adapting, innovating, and coming together to tackle the threat of rising water.
Miami's luxury towers have everything: car elevators, rooftop pools, celebrity neighborhoods, and something completely unexpected called gradual descent. A new study shows dozens of beachfront high-rises are slowly sinking into the ground. Just a couple of inches over a few years and still moving. What's going on? And is it going to get worse? Let's find out. When you look at a map of South Florida, the city of Miami is mostly on the mainland. Just off the coast lies a long barrier island. That's Miami Beach, the stretch you see in most drone shots and travel clips. Fancy cars, the beach, the clubs, the glass towers right next to the water, that's all on this island. But it didn't always look like that. For a long time, this area was mostly older hotels and simple apartment buildings. As prices went up and richer buyers started chasing ocean views, developers began knocking those down and putting luxury high-rises in their place. Floor by floor, that island turned into a narrow wall of glass facing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the problem. Miami Beach sits only 4 to 5 feet above sea level. That's barely enough height for comfort. Each fall, king tides push water up through drains and across certain streets on bright, clear days. The flooding sometimes gets so bad that locals could kayak through parking lots for fun. That might sound like a funny video, but for researchers, it raised a serious question. Could the same landscape be shifting beneath the towers too? Some buildings had already shown signs of movement, and the question became whether the ground itself was still settling under all that concrete and steel. To find out, scientists used a method called INSAR, which stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. It works by having satellites scan the same spot on Earth over and over, using radar to detect tiny changes in elevation. It's like watching a tower in slow motion from space, tracking whether it holds steady or slowly sinks. Those scans stack hundreds of satellite passes over the same balcony corners and roof edges. It's the same kind of radar NASA uses to track volcanoes and ground shifts. With enough images, researchers can spot motion as small as the thickness of a credit card. Between 2016 and 2023, they focused on this section of coastline from Sunny Isles to Miami Beach. The data showed that at least 35 high-rise buildings had moved downward over that period. In some cases, the ground had dropped just under an inch. In others, it was closer to 3. That may not seem like much, but over a short time, and in structures this heavy, it means something's off. These weren't new buildings under construction. Most were already finished, which makes the continued movement unusual. In theory, they should have settled and stopped, but they didn't. So what exactly is making the ground sink under these towers? Let's look underground, specifically right under these nice-looking buildings. Beneath the island is a mix of sand and Miami limestone. It is strong enough to build on, but it behaves more like hardened coral than solid mountain rock. Water moves through it, pressure moves through it, and sometimes the ground shifts in ways engineers can't properly predict. One possible explanation is something called creep deformation. It sounds like a villain from a B-movie, but it's actually a slow-motion rearranging of particles under constant pressure. Imagine parking a heavy truck on soft ground. It makes little dents right away, but if the truck stays there for a long time, those dents slowly get deeper. The ground keeps squishing a tiny bit at a time. That slow squishing is what might be happening under these buildings. But it's not just the weight. Construction itself can wake the ground up. Pile drivers, excavation, and heavy machinery can shake the sandy layers enough that older buildings nearby start shifting again. The study also found that some of the newer towers showed stronger movement overall, likely because the soil beneath them was still adjusting after recent construction. And then there's the water. The limestone underneath acts like a sponge, soaking up water from the ocean below and the rain above. When that water moves around, it quietly eats away at the rock and shifts the sand that holds everything up. That's how the ground slowly loosens. So, we have a spongy ground, heavy buildings, and the constant shaking from construction. Plus, water flowing through the rock. Over time, all of that adds up. It presses down just a little at first, then a little more. We're only talking inches, but even small uneven shifts can be enough to make engineers nervous. So, what does this mean for the buildings and all the people making social media reels? Probably, and hopefully nothing. At least not tomorrow. We're still far away from disaster movie scenarios. Structures won't topple over. There won't be sudden sinkholes swallowing cars. It's not how it works. But this problem does raise some eyebrows, especially after what happened just a few miles north in Surfside. In 2021, the Champlain Towers South partially collapsed. It was a huge tragedy that Miami will remember forever. That disaster didn't happen just because the ground moved. Issues kept piling up slowly over the years. Engineers discovered cracks, rust, and bad drainage. The building was falling apart from all sides, and then it was too late to do anything about it. But since then, the city has been paying more attention. Engineers are reassessing older buildings near the coast, and local officials are pushing for stricter inspections. The radar data doesn't mean a building is unsafe, but it can be an early warning. A signal that something deserves a closer look. For residents, though, there's a catch. Right now, there's no rule that says developers or building managers have to monitor ground movement with satellite scans. The study didn't involve teams going inside or taking core samples. It was just a space-based scan from above. If you zoom out from the sinking tower drama and look at that long strip of land, it's already one of the weirdest pieces of real estate on the planet. A good portion of the Miami lifestyle is literally fake land. Star Island, Palm, Hibiscus, the Venetian Chain, and a bunch of other spots started as sand at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The bay was dredged in the 1920s. The sand was piled into islands, and developers turned those piles into celebrity neighborhoods where houses now cost tens of millions of dollars. Some of the richest people on Earth treat this area like their private game board. Fisher Island, just off South Beach, currently has the most expensive zip code in the United States, with a median listing price in the 8-figure range. A bit farther up sits Indian Creek, known as the Billionaire Bunker. It has only 41 houses, its own police force, and neighbors like Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. One empty 1.8-acre lot there was recently listed for around $200 million, just for the dirt and the view. And all of this floats along the edge of Biscayne Bay, next to an actual national park full of beautiful marine creatures like dolphins, manatees, and sea turtles. More than 100 bottlenose dolphins live in and around the bay year-round, racing past boat docks and tall condos, like they're extras in someone else's movie. So, what happens next? Engineers keep scanning. Inspectors keep checking, and everyone online keeps posting drone shots like nothing odd is happening under their feet. That's Miami, a strange blend of glamour and physics that never quite behaves. It's not a crisis, it's a maintenance routine. As long as the people in charge pay attention to quieter signals like slow dips in elevation or small structural changes, the skyline should hold. Maybe it settles a bit, maybe it stretches and groans. Now that engineers and scientists are aware of this issue, they can prepare and propose solutions. Until then, the towers will still be up and the bay will still shine bright. The whole city will keep drifting in its own style, just slightly downward. You're chilling in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. A friend calls you up. Hey, I'm here too. Meet me in Maui. Great, but how do you get there? Your first thought is probably to take a ferry, but that's impossible. Hawaii is a pretty unique place. It's the most expensive state to live in. It has its own official language besides English. And it's the only American state made up entirely of islands. Hawaii has a total of 137 islands. 8 are the main ones, but only 6 are open to tourists. And the distance between those islands is probably bigger than you'd expect. For example, traveling from Oahu to the Big Island is around 185 miles, which is about the same distance as Chicago to Indianapolis. You might be surprised that you can't make that trip by boat. In fact, the only ferry system that actually takes passengers in Hawaii runs between Maui and Lanai. That's it. So your only option is to travel between islands is by plane. Honestly, it's a little surprising, especially considering how many people visit Hawaii every year. Tourism pretty much drives their economy, and in the first 8 months of 2024 alone, over 6 million people visited its beautiful beaches. Knowing that, we would expect Hawaii to set up a good ferry system to make it easier for visitors to get around. Just like in Greece. This would probably boost tourism even more, bringing more money to the state. But believe me, authorities and private companies also know that. In fact, they've already tried it. Ferries were a big way of getting around in Hawaii from the 19th century up until the 1950s. Since then, there have been a few attempts to bring back a ferry service, but unfortunately, they have all failed. One of the biggest attempts was the Hawaii Super Ferry, which aimed to provide a fast, affordable boat service between islands. It could carry almost 900 passengers and even allow them to bring their own cars along. The trial run started in 2007, and people were excited, but it turned into a big fiasco. A bunch of legal and environmental issues came up, like concerns about the impact on marine life, especially whales. The courts decided the ferry didn't go through the proper environmental reviews, and that caused a lot of trouble. By 2009, after tons of protests and setbacks, they had to shut it down. If a project like this comes up again, it will probably fail one more time. And there are a few reasons why it's almost impossible to set up a regular ferry system there. Let's start by talking about Hawaii's rough waters. They are deep and wild. Take the Alenoiaha Channel, for example. It's a 30-mile stretch that separates Maui from the Big Island. Its name means Great Billow Smashing Channel, and it lives up to that. It's over 6,000 feet deep, making it one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. The wind there is also super strong, the fastest in Hawaii's coastal waters. But it's not any easier in the rest of the archipelago. The whole region gets hit by storms from the Pacific up north, sending big waves crashing into the islands and making the waters rough and unpredictable. Swells can come from 3, 4, or even more directions, making the sea feel really choppy. Someone who's not used to taking ferry boats would definitely find that, well, uncomfortable, to say the least. To deal with rough seas like this, the ferries have to be really big and strong. But that also makes them more expensive and harder to run than the ones in places like Alaska or Washington State. Another reason it's so tough to set up this system today has to do with marine life. A big ship moving through the shallower waters when docking could really damage the local ecosystem. And there's also the problem that the sea routes are also the migration paths of many sea animals, like humpback whales and spinner dolphins. Not to mention, ferry services can make it easier to spread harmful plants and animals, what experts call invasive species. See, Hawaii's ecosystem is super unique because it's been isolated out in the middle of the Pacific. When we talk about plants and animals that are native to Hawaii, we mean they got there on their own, no humans involved. They arrived with the help of waves, wind, or even birds flying over. But events like these are super rare. So for over 70 million years, their plants and animals didn't have to deal with outside competition. That's made them really fragile. So, when new species get brought in by us, it can be a big problem, and they could end up harming the environment. Hawaii's already been battling invasive species like fire ants, coqui frogs, and Meconium, a fast-growing plant from South America that takes over native forests. People there worry that ferries, which carry cars and cargo between islands, could accidentally spread these invaders even more. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, the long distances between their lands don't really help either. For example, if you were to travel from Oahu to the big island of Hawaii by boat, it would take around 30 hours, and that's without any stops. The same trip by plane takes about 50 minutes. Ferries that cover long distances are much more expensive, so they need a much bigger demand to make them profitable. On top of that, the state doesn't really have the infrastructure, like enough ports and terminals to support the operations. So setting up new routes is pretty much out of the question. Airplanes, on the other hand, are a different story. The air travel industry in Hawaii is already well established and super competitive. That means flying is still the most practical option in Hawaii. Planes are quick, they don't make you seasick, and are pretty affordable, usually costing around $100 for a round trip. Okay, but what do the locals think about all this? Well, apparently, there isn't a huge demand for residents to commute between the islands all that often. Oahu is the busiest island in Hawaii, with about 70% of the state's population living there. It is where Honolulu, the capital, is located, and where most of the state's business happens. So, people from the other islands usually come over for a specific doctor's appointment or to catch a big concert. And that might happen once or twice a year, no more than that. So, even if people could choose between taking a ferry and a plane for these special occasions, most of them would probably still prefer flying. There are plenty of options between the main island airports. Planes usually start flying around 5 in the morning, and there are flights available every hour until the last one, which is usually at 9 in the evening. If you've been dreaming of going to this paradisiacal place but are worried about spending too much on plane tickets, I have some tips for you. First off, keep in mind that visiting all the main islands in 5 days or less is way too ambitious. So, if you don't have much time to spend there, think about your priorities. Each of the 6 islands open to tourists has its own vibe and activities. But you don't need to visit them all in one trip, and you can save some money by sticking to fewer islands. You can still explore the diversity of the islands by picking 2 that offer a nice contrast to each other. For example, while Oahu has that bustling city energy, Kauai has a much more relaxed vibe. Also, flights in the morning are usually cheaper, and it might be better to fly on a weekday rather than the weekend, although the price difference isn't usually huge. Hopefully these tips will save you some cash while still having an unforgettable island hopping adventure in Hawaii. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who's also dreaming of exploring these amazing islands.
Our planet's biggest and meanest supervolcanoes are waking up. When they erupt, you'll surely notice it, even if you live thousands of miles away from the epicenter. Scientists are worried we might not have enough time to prepare and deal with the consequences of a supereruption. There's some volcanic activity close to the Italian city of Naples. And no, it has nothing to do with the famous Mount Vesuvius, but with another volcano. This one is harder to see as it doesn't have a tall peak like Vesuvius. But don't let this bad guy trick you. It could be way more dangerous than its giant neighbor. It does have a huge crater that's about 8 miles wide. This volcano is called Capi Flegrei, and it's actually one of the largest volcanoes in Europe. sitting under the town of Pasquale. So, Campi Flegrei erupted 39,000 years ago with a bang so massive it spread ash across the whole Mediterranean region. It also caused the temperature to drop by over 16 degrees Fahrenheit across Eastern Europe. It was the biggest volcanic eruption in Europe in 200,000 years. Since then, Campi Flegrei has had smaller eruptions, and the last one happened in 1538. Now the area is full of small craters, hot springs, and bubbling pools, and they're all proof that this volcano is still very much alive and brewing something. Since the early 2000s, the ground in the giant crater and the town nearby have been slowly rising by about 1 to 1.5 inches every year. There were at least 150 earthquakes that shook this supervolcano lately. In May 2024, there was a 4.4 magnitude in the area, the biggest in the last 40 years. Residents had to leave their homes and camp outside, fearing there would be more earthquakes. No one knows how Campi Flegrei is going to behave in the following months or years, but the authorities are organizing evacuation exercises to prepare the population just in case. The Italian volcano looks like an innocent kitten compared to the real giants like Yellowstone. For a volcano to deserve the title of a super one, it must be able to produce catastrophic-scale eruptions and eject huge amounts of magma, ash, and volcanic gases. The Yellowstone giant meets these criteria. Even though it moves from time to time, the Yellowstone supervolcano hasn't erupted for 640,000 years. But when it does wake up, it might erupt with incredible power, about the same amount as 10 huge nuclear power stations can produce. Under the ground, beneath Yellowstone, there's a super-hot area full of molten rock called magma. As more magma moves into a big space called a magma chamber, the ground above starts to swell or rise. When the magma cools down, the ground falls. Between 2004 and 2009, the ground at Yellowstone rose by almost 10 inches, but then it started to slowly go back down in 2010. Scientists aren't sure if it's going to erupt anytime soon. There's also another big volcano called Long Valley in California that has been active since 1980, and it can be a really big threat. Scientists studying this supervolcano found out that before its biggest eruption, 760,000 years ago, the buildup may have taken less than a year. Now, that's bad news, because a supervolcano eruption can have a huge effect on the world, like the eruption of the Toba volcano in Sumatra around 74,000 years ago. It became the biggest volcanic eruption the Earth had seen in 28 million years. It covered parts of Indonesia, India, and the Indian Ocean with a thick layer of volcanic debris, almost like a 6-inch blanket. The amount of rock it spewed out was like stacking nearly 3 million Empire State Buildings. The giant crater it left behind can still be seen from space. All the ash and gases shot up into the air and blocked some of the sunlight. It caused a volcanic winter that lasted about 6 to 10 years. Some scientists think this eruption might have even affected early humans. Around the time Toba erupted, the human population took a sharp dip, and there were far fewer people. Some say this is why all modern humans come from a small group of survivors. According to the Toba catastrophe theory, most early humans in Europe and Asia didn't survive the cold and harsh climate after the eruption, but a lucky group lived through all that in Africa. Not all scientists agree with this idea, and some archaeological and climate records show a different story. Another volcano that changed the world in a big way was Mount Tambora in 1815. The next year went down in history as the year without a summer. It was cold and rainy, and there was snow and frost even in the middle of summer, especially in Europe and North America. This happened because the volcano sent out a lot of sulfur dioxide into the sky, which spread all over the world and made the planet colder. When Tambora erupted, it caused huge tsunamis that smashed homes and took the lives of around 10,000 people. Afterward, about 80,000 more people passed away because of the consequences the eruption had caused in the world. The cold weather ruined crops, so food became really expensive. And because horses were the main way people traveled, the cost of oats that they ate went way up too. Some people even think this led to the invention of the bicycle in 1817, as a new way to get around. The eruption made the Earth colder for about 3 years. Now, even though the Tambora eruption was so powerful, Krakatoa, another volcano in Indonesia, stole the show when it erupted in 1883. It was just easier to spread information about it through telegrams and photos. Its final blast was the loudest recorded sound in history, and people could hear it on 10% of the entire Earth's surface. The eruption started a tsunami, with waves about half as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Now, if we only had 12 months to prepare for a supervolcano eruption, it would be really hard to store enough food and get ready. But don't panic just yet. Supervolcano eruptions are very rare, and the last one happened 26,500 years ago in New Zealand. Scientists think that a super eruption happens once every 100,000 years on average. But the sad part here is that the Earth doesn't follow a perfect timeline. There could be clusters of super eruptions with shorter gaps between them and then longer quiet periods. Since there have already been 2 super eruptions in the last 100,000 years, there's always a chance one could happen again sooner than we expect. Plus, although there are places like Yellowstone and Long Valley where we expect volcanoes to erupt, there are less obvious possible hotspots. In Chile, there's a volcano called Laguna del Maule that has erupted in the past and left behind a huge crater. Over the last 20 years, the ground there has been swelling really fast, rising up to almost 1 foot a year. Some people are worried that this could be a sign of a big eruption coming. But scientists say there's not enough magma yet to cause a super eruption. In Bolivia, the Juturancu volcano is also acting up. It's part of a group of volcanoes that have caused super eruptions in the past. Since the 1960s, the ground around Juturancu has been lifting, but the last eruption was 250,000 years ago. Even though the magma might be rising, it's not enough to worry about just yet. The chances of a super eruption happening during our lifetime are 1 in 1,400, which is pretty low, so you don't need to worry too much. But just like someone wins the lottery every week with very small chances, a super eruption could happen sometime in the future, and when it does, we'll need to be prepared. You have friends over for dinner. You set your drink on the counter and go help your friend set out some desserts. When you get back, you notice the liquid in your cup. It's sloshing around and the ice cubes look like ships on a rough sea. Now you feel it too. On the ceiling, the chandelier is swinging like mad. Then you hear someone scream, "Earthquake!" The house and everything in it is rocking back and forth. You try to run for cover, but the shaking keeps you stuck in place, fighting to keep your balance. The cabinets look possessed, and glasses and dishes fly out and smash on the floor. The bookshelves topple over, and everything hanging on the walls sways and falls off. You duck under the dining room table, trying not to get hurt on all those broken dishes. Yeah, you've been through earthquakes before, but none like this. Checking your phone? Typical, no signal. You can't believe what's about to happen. The screams get louder, and suddenly the whole house collapses. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. Disaster came in the afternoon, just when everyone was out enjoying themselves. To cause serious, life-changing damage, you need to have a magnitude of around 7 or so on the Richter scale. This one was 9.5. This part of Chile is smack dab on the so-called Ring of Fire, the most active volcanic and seismic area in the world along the Pacific Rim. The initial shaking lasted around 10 minutes, and after 2 days, many aftershocks were still strong enough to set off a volcano in the south of the country. But that's not where it ended. The earthquake unleashed a series of tidal waves all over the Pacific Ocean, with some reaching over 80 feet high. The waves and earthquake were so strong that they even affected Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. It caused around $500 million $1960 worth of damage. Many were left homeless. Much of their infrastructure was smashed too. Buildings as far as the eye could see were toppled, and debris piled everywhere. Scientists estimate that this earthquake was so powerful, it shifted the Earth's axis, making our days 1.26 microseconds shorter. That might not seem like a lot, but think about it. Just one natural disaster was strong enough to make time move. Many of the coastal cities were flattened and floods were widespread. The economy spiraled downward. According to studies, if this earthquake happened today, it'd cause more than $20 billion in damages. So what would happen if an earthquake twice that size hit without warning? For starters, you'd likely feel the effects even further away. Tidal waves wouldn't just hit the coasts of Japan and the Philippines. They would move even further to China, Korea, Vietnam, and even Australia. And those waves would be significantly higher than 80 feet, perhaps double that. That's like 8 giraffes piled on top of each other, surfing your way. If you lived by the coast, you'd notice the waves. If you saw the water recede way back so you could practically see where all the fish call home, you'd know it was time to run. Chances are that a tsunami's heading your way. Say it really happens. You're caught under the wreckage, not knowing what's going on. You manage to free yourself and escape to the fresh air. And you're not alone, because all the houses in the neighborhood have turned into piles of bricks and rubble. The bridges have also collapsed, leaving people stranded on either side. You look around, dust yourself off, and rush to find help. Fire trucks and ambulances drive between the broken-down cars and rubble. You try to make it to your car, but the aftershocks are still hitting, and you're getting tossed to the sidewalk. With all the cell towers down, you can't call anyone on your phone. Your knees are shaking, but you manage to power through. Once you reach your car, you see it crushed under a boulder, like a giant soda can. You continue on foot and eventually reach downtown. It looks as if some giant got angry and knocked all the buildings down. You push forward and try to see if you can find some help. Without warning, your phone vibrates. You check it and see 1,000 notifications about a 20-magnitude earthquake. You're still shaking, but that's all you. The ground is still for now. Uh-oh. You hear something in the distance, racing towards you. To your right, you see tidal waves as tall as buildings charging at you. Still in shock, not knowing what to do, you now come to your senses and run. You don't even know which way to go. There's a tsunami right behind you, and in front of you are broken down buildings with rocks and concrete still falling everywhere. Wait, there's a building that's somehow still standing. You need to get on top of that thing. You reach the elevator, but it's jammed. Not surprising. You bolt up the stairs as fast as you can, tripping on broken glass and plaster, but always managing to get back up. You look out a window and see the water. It's so close. You're nearly at the top. A few more flights and whoosh. The water forces its way into the building and drags you down at least 2 floors. You can barely see anything. Still, you know you must swim up. But the water keeps forcing you downwards. After about 30 seconds, you manage to swim your way out and continue climbing to the top. You scramble to the top floor and collapse on the roof. You're safe for now. The tidal wave is still going strong, plowing its way through the ravaged city center. Your phone is now waterlogged and useless. You have a perfect 360-degree view of your town covered in water and debris. The ground starts to shake again. Maybe you'll just sit around until this is all over, waiting for the rescue helicopter. But then, a loud explosion that almost breaks your eardrums shakes the ground even more. Off in the distance, smoke is rising, and soon it covers the entire sky. Darkness hides the morning sun. That's when you can see lava shooting up into the air and landing nearby. The lava forms into a river, flowing its way into town block by block. With this much seismic movement and the high intensity of the earthquake, the world's tectonic plates have shifted so that magma is pushing its way to the surface. From the earth, steam begins to vent. Then the heat hits you. You see the magma cover the ground like a blanket, eating up every car in its way. What's worse is that the magma is melting the foundations of the buildings that managed to withstand the earthquake and the tsunami. The buildings in the distance are now sinking and collapsing into the raging lava pool that's replaced your town. One by one, every building descends. That means, uh-oh, the building where you're standing is also swaying. It's about to fail. That's when you see the light. You look up and see a helicopter above in the distance. You wave your arms, run around, jump, anything to get noticed. And it works. The chopper makes a few circles and finally drops you a rope ladder. As you're lifted in the chopper, you take a good look at the world below you as it wriggles around like noodles in a strainer. You land a few miles out and are immediately treated by a doctor in an emergency triage center. You were one of the lucky ones. A year later, the tsunami water has receded, the lava that flowed inland has cooled, but all that magma permanently changed the ground below it, and the whole town is gone. The disaster has thrown the entire country into a financial nightmare that'll last decades. It takes months to survey the town, making sure there's no dangerous electrical wires or busted gas pipes anywhere. They're rebuilding your town farther inland from where the old one was. In other towns, they rebuild directly over the ruins. In others, they just decide to move everyone to a nearby city. It happened 66 million years ago. Hey, it could have been September. A massive asteroid slammed into Earth, bringing along chaos and devastation. The tragic aftermath of the terrifying collision led to the extinction of dinosaurs. Yes, I'm talking about the Chicxulub asteroid that left a massive crater in Mexico and changed life on Earth forever. And now, it turns out it wasn't the only cosmic rock to hit our planet during that time. Scientists have just confirmed there was another asteroid. This second space rock wasn't as big as Chicxulub, but it still packed a punch. It crashed to the ground off the coast of West Africa, smashing into the ocean and leaving a crater called the Nader crater. And tell you what, it wasn't a small splash. The impact was so powerful, it triggered a whole tsunami. It was more than 2,600 feet high, almost as high as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest man-made structure in the world. But how did we come to the conclusion that there was a second impact? Well, this researcher spotted the Nader crater in 2022. Dr. Nicholson was looking for some high-tech scans of the ocean floor when he noticed a massive 5.5-mile-wide depression under almost 1,000 feet of water. Well, he thought it could be an asteroid impact crater, but at the time, the evidence he had wasn't solid. But now, scientists have confirmed that this is the real deal. A second asteroid did hit Earth during the dinosaur extinction era. Now, let's see how they figured all this out. For one thing, there were those super high-resolution 3D seismic images. They allowed researchers to peel back layers of the ocean floor and get a crystal-clear look at the crater. It was like going from a blurry old ultrasound to the kind of 3D scans where you can see every little feature. Their findings confirm that the crater was left by an asteroid, somewhere between 1,500 to 1,640 feet wide. And it didn't just create a hole in the ground. The impact was so intense that it produced a central peak, formed escalating ridges around the crater, and even left a damage zone that stretched out for thousands of miles. Using those super detailed images, the scientists have managed to reconstruct what happened right after the asteroid hit the surface of our planet. First, it slammed into the ocean, creating an initial bowl-shaped crater. As the shockwave spread, the seabed was shaken so violently that it triggered landslides, and the soft sediment surrounding the crater collapsed inward, creating a noticeable brim. As you already know, the impact also triggered a tsunami, and it was so shockingly powerful that its waves didn't just go outward, they actually turned back towards the crater, leaving huge scars on the ocean floor. And this wasn't just one big wave. No, it was a whole series of them, a train of tsunamis smashing everything in their path. Now, this second asteroid impact is a huge deal for scientists. It's a rare opportunity to study a marine impact crater in such incredible detail. There are only about 20 confirmed marine craters in the world, and none of them have been captured with this level of precision before. Plus, this data allows scientists to test new ideas about how craters form in water. You see, unlike craters on land, marine craters are hidden under layers of sediment, which makes them tricky to study. But with this new 3D imaging, we can look at the crater in all its layers. It's like slicing into a cake to see what's inside. Dr. Nicholson and his team are now dreaming of drilling into the crater and recovering samples from deep below the ocean floor. This would allow them to measure the shock pressure during the impact and figure out what happened in the minutes, hours, and days following the collision. Of course, the Chicxulub asteroid is still the star of the show when it comes to the dinosaurs' extinction. This space traveler was giant, somewhere between 6 and 9 miles wide. It hit Earth at a devastating angle, sending vaporized rock and gas into the atmosphere. It caused an impact winter that lasted for 15 years because all that stuff blocked out the sun and plunged Earth into darkness. Now, probably the most intriguing thing is that some experts think the Nader asteroid might have been a chunk that had broken off from Chicxulub before it hit Earth. It's still just a theory, but if true, it could mean that Earth got hit by a double whammy from space. Now, let's travel back in time to the year 1908 in Siberia. Look around. You see nothing but trees and rivers. And suddenly, a huge object, around 150 to 300 feet in diameter, dashes through the Earth's atmosphere. Is it a comet? An asteroid? Scientists aren't sure. What they do know for sure is that this intruder blew up in the sky over Tunguska, leading to one of the most powerful blasts in recorded history. It completely leveled the forest below, knocking out 80 million trees over an area of around 830 square miles. And that's an area larger than that of cities like Los Angeles or New York. The trees were literally flattened, and their trunks were stripped of branches. They were also arranged in a bizarre radial pattern around the epicenter. But what if this explosion had happened over a city? Every single building would have been destroyed, and countless lives would have been lost. Luckily, this disaster occurred in a super remote part of Siberia. The creepiest thing, though? When scientists finally reached the area years later, they found no impact crater. No wonder it led to even more mystery. The most logical explanation is that when the object went off in the sky, probably around 3 to 6 miles above the ground, it blew up before it could hit the ground, and still, it didn't stop the blast from leveling an entire forest. Fast forward to 2013 and another mind-blowing event, this time over a much more populated area, the city of Chelyabinsk. It was a regular February morning when an asteroid about 60 feet in diameter entered Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky. It was moving at a staggering speed of around 43,000 miles per hour. It blew up in midair, about 18 miles above the city. It was a horrific view, but luckily, the asteroid disintegrated high enough in the atmosphere without hitting the ground. If it had touched down, the city would have been in big trouble, because even though there was no direct impact, the explosion still created a shockwave that tore through the atmosphere, hitting the ground with enough force to shatter windows all over the place. The blast damaged around 7,200 buildings, but fortunately, there were no direct fatalities. Still, it was a major wake-up call. This wasn't just some far-off cosmic event like Tunguska. This asteroid exploded over a modern populated area, and the damage was very real. The good news? Scientists are getting better at spotting such objects before they get too close. Space agencies around the world, like NASA, are tracking near-Earth objects to figure out which ones could pose a risk. But as we can see from these two events, sometimes space rocks can still sneak up on us. And while the chances of a major impact are low, the stakes are really high. At the moment, there's one asteroid that NASA's keeping an eye on. It's called Bennu, and it's about the same size as the Nader impactor. Bennu is considered one of the most hazardous objects in near-Earth orbit. According to NASA, there's a small chance it could hit the Earth between the years 2178 and 2290, and the biggest risk date is September 24, 2182. But don't freak out just yet. The odds of the impact are only 1 in 2,700. But still, it's a reminder that Earth is always in the cosmic firing line. If all the volcanoes on Earth suddenly erupted together, it'd be loud. We'd also have around 1,500 of these formations bursting at once. Now normally it's just 10 to 20 volcanoes that are active each day. But what would the world look like if they all blew their tops simultaneously? Geologists think it wouldn't be pretty. Even if only the land volcanoes erupted together, it would set off a chain reaction way worse than anything we've ever seen before. The two big problems would be ash and volcanic gases. While the explosions in lava would be damaging for people nearby, the real danger lies in what happens next. A thick layer of ash would cover the planet, blocking out sunlight completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means crops would fade away and temperatures would drop considerably. And all this ash cloud could remain in our atmosphere for up to 10 years. Now, ash aside, there's also acid rain to worry about. Volcanic gases like hydrochloric acid and sulfur dioxide would mix with the atmosphere and fall back down as acid rain. This type of weather would harm the groundwater and ocean surfaces. Even if humans would find a way to survive up to this point, we'd have no corals and no other sea creatures around. Scientists have seen similar events in Earth's history at a smaller scale. Big volcanic eruptions have been linked to mass extinctions. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it cooled parts of the world for 2 years. But the extra carbon dioxide from these eruptions could also heat the planet, the same way we turn our stoves to broil for that extra crispy layer on our casserole. Geologists also mentioned that there's evidence in our atmosphere that stuff like this may have happened in the distant past. During the Cretaceous period, carbon dioxide levels were way higher than today, which made it difficult for marine life to thrive. Who would survive all this? Probably just some extremophiles, these organisms that survive in harsh conditions like hot springs or deep undersea vents. As for humans, we could all lay low in underground bunkers until things clear up, or build multiple space stations that could fit us all. Yeah, right. The chances of all volcanoes erupting at once, though, are very slim. Whew! That's because there isn't one giant source supplying all the volcanoes on Earth. Each one of these openings has its own deposit of magma, except for a few cases where they indeed share the supply. For example, in 1912, Nova Rupta in Alaska erupted alongside another volcano sharing magma. Scientists have also found evidence of magma hiding under volcanic areas, like under the Taupau volcanic zone in New Zealand. This magma can spread out horizontally for long distances, but is still just a local feature. Even if we consider all the magma under Taupau as one system, it's not connected to other volcanic areas like Indonesia or the Philippines. Because the great majority are isolated, volcanoes can't sync up to erupt at once. The magma comes from different processes, like mantle decompression or adding water to the mantle through subduction. There's no way to make all these different volcanoes erupt together because of how tectonics work. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see interesting volcano activity in the future. Take an underwater area near British Columbia, where recently about 200 small earthquakes per hour have been noted. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, off the coast of Vancouver Island, magma is set to erupt, heating the water so much that it'll bubble like soda. However, this event will likely go unnoticed by anyone other than scientists. The anticipated eruption will most likely happen around 3 miles below the ocean surface. Scientists explain that the earthquakes range from negative to 4.1 magnitude, meaning only those nearby would feel any tremors. This unusual activity gives us a rare opportunity to study how the Earth's crust forms. The magma beneath the ocean floor is estimated to be almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but will cool rapidly upon eruption and contact with water. This runny rock will solidify upon contact with the seafloor, turning black quickly. This event will be useful for biologists too, who will have the opportunity to study the marine animals' response to any changes, like run! Antarctica, often seen as a vast icy continent, also holds a volcanic surprise beneath its frozen surface. Researchers have identified over 130 under the western ice sheet alone, making it the largest volcanic region on Earth. Most of these volcanoes, about 90, were only recently discovered in 2017. But could any of these Antarctic volcanoes actually erupt? Well, it depends on which volcano we're talking about. While these formations are relatively young in geologic terms, it's hard for scientists to tell if they're still active or not. There are only 2 confirmed active volcanoes in Antarctica, Deception Island and Mount Erebus. The latter, standing tall as the highest peak on the continent, has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It's known for emitting gas and steam, and sometimes even throwing out rocks in what are called strombolian eruptions. One of its most notable features is a persistent lava lake in its crater, a rare phenomenon due to specific conditions needed to keep the surface molten. For instance, It's fueled by a steady supply of magma from deep within the Earth's mantle. This continuous inflow of molten rock provides the material for the lava lake to exist. It also features low ambient temperatures. Despite its location in Antarctica, Erebus has relatively mild temperatures in its summit region because of the heat generated by the volcanic activity. This allows the lava lake to remain liquid rather than freezing over. Deception Island, another active volcano, last erupted in the 70s. While it's currently not showing signs of imminent eruption, it's being monitored closely for any concerning activity. Apart from these two being confirmed to be active, Antarctica is dotted with fumaroles, openings in the Earth's crust that release gases and vapors. Sometimes these fumaroles can create icy towers reaching heights of 10 feet. What we should focus on is maybe supervolcanoes. They're this type that has the potential to produce the most massive and destructive eruptions. Unlike the typical one, which has a single vent, supervolcanoes have a vast magma chamber beneath the surface, spanning tens or even hundreds of miles in diameter. Their eruptions can have catastrophic effects on the surrounding area and even impact global climate patterns because of the amounts of ash and gases they spill out into the atmosphere. One famous supervolcano is the Yellowstone one, which some say is gearing up for another eruption. It has the capacity to unleash a colossal eruption, spewing over 240 cubic miles of material. As much as we'd like to predict its behavior, volcanoes don't stick to a calendar. On the contrary, eruptions simply happen when there's enough magma beneath the surface. There also needs to be enough pressure for the magma to travel upwards. As far as we can measure, these conditions are not currently met at Yellowstone. Sure, many volcanoes operate on a cyclical pattern, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone is overdue. In fact, Yellowstone has had just 3 major eruptions over the past 2.1 million years. Also, the term supervolcano refers to the formation's size, not necessarily how fussy it is. Yellowstone's monitoring is extensive, tracking seismicity, ground deformation, thermal emissions, gas, water chemistry, and surface changes. Signs of an eruption would include thousands of earthquakes over a short period. We'd also see deformation on the ground and weird gas emissions ahead of time. Stable as it might look like for now, the consequences of it having a major eruption could look ugly. Ash dispersion could blanket a 500-mile radius, potentially disrupting Midwest agriculture and clogging waterways. Ash and gas emissions into the stratosphere could induce global climatic effects, making our planet colder for several years. And yes, we've seen some research that it shows there's more liquid molten rock under the Yellowstone volcano than scientists believe. But that doesn't translate to imminent danger.
Earth has one huge connected global ocean that covers about 71% of the planet's surface. And since it's all water, it could make sense that it's the same height everywhere in the world, right? Strangely, at the Panama Canal, the Pacific Ocean is sitting higher than the Atlantic. And it gets even stranger. In the Indian Ocean, there's a massive gravity low where sea level sits dozens of feet lower than the global average. Let's figure out the mystery of the Pacific Ocean first. The difference in height between it and the Atlantic is, on average, about 8 inches, and that's a carefully measured, long-term difference. We aren't talking about waves or high tides here. The thing is, water expands when it's warm. The Pacific is usually warmer than the Atlantic, so its water kinda takes up more space. Salinity matters too. The Pacific is less salty in many regions. Fresher water is less dense, and less dense water sits a little higher. Then there are currents and winds. Strong trade winds, which are winds that blow from east to west just north and south of the equator, push massive amounts of water westward across the Pacific. That water piles up along continental edges. But probably the most important and unexpected factor is that gravity isn't the same everywhere on Earth. Continents, islands, and even underwater mountain chains pull on the ocean's surface. And the ocean actually follows Earth's uneven gravity field, not its geometric shape. Because of all this, global sea level can vary by up to 10 feet from one region to another. Now imagine how difficult it was to fight gravity and build a canal connecting these two oceans. Engineers had to consider the Pacific-Atlantic height difference while working on the construction of the Panama Canal. Surprisingly, it turned out that it wasn't the main obstacle. There were much bigger problems, but we'll talk about them a bit later. So one day, people looked at Panama and thought, how hard could it be to dig a canal and connect two oceans? Very hard. The surface of Panama is steep, muddy, rainy, and unstable. So instead of digging in a sandbox, building a canal would be carving a trench through a wet, collapsing mountain. Engineers wanted a sea-level canal cut straight across so ships could cruise through without any locks or lifting. But Panama wouldn't cooperate. Every time workers dug into a hillside, the dirt slid right back down. During the rainy season, rivers flooded everything, burying the equipment. Then workers started getting sick constantly. At the time, scientists didn't fully understand that mosquitoes were spreading diseases, so outbreaks were literally wiping out crews. Thousands of people lost their lives. Eventually, the whole project collapsed, both financially and physically. Years later, the US tried again, but this time they decided to take nature into consideration. Instead of digging straight through at sea level, they built a giant water elevator system. It works like this. Ships enter huge chambers and the gates closed. Next, water fills in and the ships get lifted about 85 feet. That's basically the height of an 8-story building. That's where a huge artificial lake is. The ships cruise across that lake, then get lowered back down on the other side. It's like moving ships over a hill using bathtubs the size of skyscrapers. Anyway, what's the deal with Earth's gravity? Forget the idea that our planet is a perfect ball. Imagine it as a lumpy and spinning potato. The middle bulges out a bit because of the planet's rotation. The crust isn't uniform either. The density below the surface changes constantly. Some areas are heavy and dense, others light and floaty. That's what actually shapes gravity across the planet. Now, it's time for the geoid to enter our story. It's the shape the ocean would have if it were shaped only by Earth's gravity and rotation, with no waves, no winds, and no tides. In other words, if it just floated freely across this lumpy potato. Over dense areas, gravity pulls harder, so the water piles up. Over lighter areas, gravity is weaker, and the water sags. For example, there's a weird spot in the Indian Ocean where gravity is actually weaker than normal. And because of that, the sea level there sits more than 328 feet lower than the surrounding ocean. That's like water dipping down the height of a 30-story building. It forms a massive circular depression covering about 1.2 million square miles. It's officially called the Indian Ocean Geoid Low. Scientists first noticed it in 1948 during a gravity survey from a ship and have been puzzled about this phenomenon for years. Why would Earth's gravity be weaker in one patch of ocean? Finally, researchers think they might have figured it out. Deep under that part of the ocean, huge plumes of hot magma may be rising from the mantle, kind of like slow-mo lava blobs pushing upward from thousands of miles below. These upwellings can shift mass inside the planet, and when mass shifts, gravity shifts too. Lean mass underneath means a slightly weaker pull, and the ocean water sinking lower in that spot. To test the idea, researchers ran massive computer simulations. They basically rewound Earth's history back 140 million years to see how the region evolved. And guess what? Their models point to the breakup of an ancient ocean that no longer exists. Apparently, tectonic plates moved and pieces of crust sank deep into the mantle in that region. They likely disturbed the material below, setting off those magma plumes. So this gravity hole isn't a hole in the water. It's a dent in Earth's gravity field, caused by deep, planet-scale plumbing problems that started millions of years ago. The depression is so extreme that it influences ocean currents, sea level readings, and even satellite paths. That's how strong these mantle processes are, even millions of years after all that tectonic drama. The big question now is, will the Indian Ocean Geoid Low ever go away, or is it here to stay? Scientists aren't 100% sure. It all depends on how the masses inside Earth move around over time. Our planet's mantle isn't solid. It's constantly shifting, rising in plumes and sinking in slabs. These slow and deep motions can either keep the gravity low intact for millions of years or eventually smooth it out. Think of it like a giant slow-moving lava lamp under the ocean. Over a few 100 million years, the blob could shift enough to erase the dip, or not. In any case, the study gives some interesting ideas and might push experts to dig deeper. The older research only modeled sinking cold slabs in the mantle. Now, the simulations include hot, rising magma plumes. They were probably key to forming the low in the first place. But there are also missing pieces in the simulation. For example, the famous Réunion hotspot, a massive mantle plume that erupted around 65 million years ago, forming the Deccan Traps across India. That eruption dumped lava over half of India. It was one of the biggest volcanic events in Earth's history. Without that plume in the simulation, some of the geoid predictions might be off. There are also mismatches between the model and reality. The predicted shape of the Earth's surface doesn't perfectly match actual measurements, especially in the Pacific, Africa, and Eurasia. The researchers say there's about an 80% correlation, which is quite good, but not perfect. Unfortunately, the simulation can't capture every detail yet. The lead researcher explains why. We just don't know exactly what Earth looked like millions of years ago. Plates were shifting, oceans were moving, and continents were crashing into each other, so there's a lot we just don't know. The models can only give us a rough idea of what the past looked like. Still, despite the small errors, the main takeaway is the following. The Indian Ocean geoid low is massive and shaped by deep mantle plumes and ancient tectonic events. It might change over the next hundreds of millions of years, or it might stick around. It's also a reminder that Earth is not a perfect smooth ball we like to imagine.
It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault, That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground. It happened in Iceland on Friday, March 19, 2021 at 8:45 p.m. About 20 miles southwest of the capital. Molten rock suddenly burst through the surface from below. Bright lava fountains then lit up the night sky. A volcano in this valley finally woke up after almost 800 years of sleeping soundly. We divide volcanoes into three categories: active, dormant, or extinct. Around 1,900 of them around the globe are considered active. That means they've erupted in the recent past and will likely do it again in the possible near future. Dormant volcanoes haven't popped off for a long time, but they still may in the future. You could say they're sort of sleeping. As for extinct ones, those guys haven't done anything in more than 1 million years. The eruption in Iceland wasn't super explosive, and this all happened 6 miles from the nearest town, so everyone was perfectly safe. Many even came to see it up close, while other brave visitors tried to fry eggs and bacon on the lava. Just be careful not to burn your breakfast black. Lava can be over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It burns everything in its path. Yet it also produces some of the most fertile land for agriculture. This eruption gave a relatively small amount of lava at first, but it's been spreading across the valley in different directions, forming a sort of shield that's constantly growing. You can never really predict how fast a lava flow will be until you see it. It all depends on how thick it is and how steep the mountain slope. Lava can ooze slowly at about 20 feet a minute, a fraction of the average person's walking speed. Or it can flow as fast as 30 miles per hour, which even the fastest person on Earth can't outrun. But the lava isn't even the most dangerous thing about volcanoes. That would be the toxic gases spewing from the eruption. And those spread faster and further than the lava flow. Luckily, in Iceland's case, the wind has been blowing these gases away from residential areas. Scientists weren't surprised this volcano erupted. They knew it was coming. Increasingly stronger earthquakes had been shaking this area for the past 15 months. There were 50,000 earthquakes within just the 3 weeks leading up to the eruption. That's 100 per hour. The volcano has been active since March, and geologists say this could last for weeks, months, years, or even decades of constant eruptions in the area. Mount Shasta is in the top 5 most dangerous volcanoes in the U.S., so geologists are keeping a close eye on it. The last eruption was in 1250. I wasn't around then, but this volcano erupts every 600 to 800 years. Which means tick-tock, we're due any day now. About an hour from Portland, Oregon, there's an active volcano that last erupted in the 19th century. Next time it goes off, Scientists think it'll produce larger amounts of ash and dust. This could cause an electrical blackout and make water unsafe to drink in the area. But the experts pay close attention to Mount Hood. They'll be able to give plenty of warning so people can react in time. Kilauea is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. It's been erupting almost constantly since 1983, making it also one of the longest eruptions known on Earth. It's the youngest land volcano in Hawaii. Volcanoes can take thousands of years to form, but others can pop up practically overnight. A volcano in Mexico just erupted in an open field in 1943 and started growing from there. Within a year, it was almost 1,500 feet tall. When the eruptions finally stopped 9 years later, the mount had reached a height of over 9,200 feet. Mount Fuji is an iconic symbol of Japan. The last time it erupted was in 1707, and it sent a shower of burning rocks as far as 60 miles away. If a similar eruption happened today, Tokyo would be within that vicinity. Mount Fuji is right on the Ring of Fire, that horseshoe-shaped region in the Pacific Ocean full of active volcanoes and earthquakes. From one end to the other, it's almost 25,000 miles long. It could wrap all the way around the Earth's equator. In January 2020, Taal volcano in the Philippines started spewing lava, sending huge plumes of ash half a mile up into the sky. The eruption even triggered a rare phenomenon, a dirty thunderstorm. That's when the smoke cloud above a volcano produces its own lightning. The chance of volcanic tsunamis was also high. Those are usually caused by tectonic movements that occur because of volcanic activity. Taal has erupted more than 30 times in the last 450 years. This volcano in Ecuador last erupted in 2016. Scientists think it might be showing some early warning signs of magma on the move. This is an active stratovolcano, a specific cone-shaped type with steep sides. They form from sticky lava that doesn't flow that easily. That lava goes around the vent, cooling and piling on itself to form these steep walls. These types are more likely to produce explosive eruptions like the ones we see in movies. Ruapehu is the oldest national park in New Zealand, a volcanic wonderland where you can closely see all those steaming craters, magnificent lakes, and unusual rock formations. It last erupted in 2007 and has had 10 eruptions since the mid-19th century. But eruptions, lava flows, and toxic gases aren't the only danger coming from volcanoes. There's also a thing called lahar, a kind of volcanic mudflow of debris. In between eruptions, snow melts and a lake forms in the caldera. If the last eruption brought mud, ash, and rocks in the lake, it becomes dangerously full. In that case, only a temporary dam holds it back. Indonesia has the biggest number of active volcanoes in the world, including one called Anak Krakatoa. It means child of Krakatoa, and its famous parent isn't far away. A huge tsunami in 2018 partially woke Junior, a scary thought since Senior had one of the most powerful eruptions ever seen on this planet in 1883. Krakatoa's boom was the loudest sound ever heard. People over 2,000 miles away could hear the explosion. The sound wave circled the globe 7 times, and scientists say it's hard to predict this volcano's eruption patterns. Mount Yasur in Vanuatu is one of just a few volcanoes in the world where you can see a lava lake. Tourists even go there to peer over the edge and get a look at the burning, bubbling lake below. Well, except for when the volcanic activity goes to levels 3 and 4 out of 5. That means there are more intense earthquakes, volcanic tremors, or steam, gas, or ash ejections. Then this place is off limits because, duh. This volcano in the DR Congo has the most active and largest lake volcano in the world. And all that lava is unusually fluid, meaning it travels faster and further than the stuff coming out of most volcanoes. It's certainly not amongst the tallest ones, but Ethiopia's Erta Ali is unique in that it has a lava lake almost constantly, which is pretty rare. The locals call it a smoking mountain because its lava lake often causes eruptions. This volcano is near the Danakil Depression, one of the hottest places on our planet. Merupi has been erupting on a regular basis since the mid-16th century. This volcano helps scientists do crucial research on how eruptions work and how they can warn people in time. After it was dormant for a while, this volcano in central Mexico sprang back to life in 1994. Ever since then, it's been producing huge mud flows and strong explosions in unpredictable intervals. In the past, enormous eruptions coming from this giant buried entire cities in pyramids. Imagine staying in a hotel and waking up to the magnificent view of a massive volcano covered in glowing rivers of lava and clouds of ash. When it lets off heat, visitors to this area in Guatemala take a chance to roast some marshmallows there. One of the most active volcanoes on Earth is on a small island north of Sicily. Stromboli has regular explosions, together with glowing lava coming from vents inside the crater. Not too far away is Etna, Europe's most active volcano and one of the biggest continental ones in the world. By the way, Earth definitely isn't the only planet with volcanoes. The largest one in our solar system is on Mars. It would cover the entire state of Arizona, and it rises nearly 3 times higher than Mount Everest. Ooh, don't look down.
Hey, can you lift a truck with your hands? No? Shocker. But let me introduce you to nature's original strongman, the ocean, which casually tossed 700-ton boulders around like they were pebbles during a mega tsunami that hit Africa thousands of years ago. This wasn't just a bad day at the beach. This mega tsunami was so powerful, it made the 2004 Indonesian and 2011 Japanese tsunamis look like kiddie pool splashes. Now, to give you an idea of how terrifying regular tsunamis already are, the Japan tsunami produced waves 133 feet tall. The Indian Ocean tsunami was slightly smaller, but it took over 200,000 lives across many countries. Now imagine something way worse. You see, for a long time, scientists thought waves that big were just science fiction. But then they found these enormous boulders, massive chunks of rock, flung far inland, and did the math. It turns out only waves around 800 feet tall could have pulled off that kind of rocky vandalism. And the culprit? A volcano that literally fell apart into the ocean and triggered one of the most powerful tsunamis Earth has ever seen. Usually, tsunamis are blamed on underwater earthquakes, tectonic plates getting into slap fights. But volcanoes? Oh, they've got tsunami potential too. In 1883, for example, a volcano in Indonesia named Krakatoa erupted for 6 months non-stop until it exploded, and the explosion was heard all the way in Australia. This triggered many tsunamis, some almost 100 feet tall. Still, that was more like a toe dip compared to the full cannonball from the mega tsunami. Back in ancient times, the volcano that crumbled during the mega tsunami was huge, and it didn't just fall apart. It lost a chunk that was 10 times the size of Mount Everest. 10 Mount Everests. It was like the Earth wanted to see what would happen if we threw a mountain into the ocean just for fun. It was so massive that when the entire side of the volcano belly flopped into the Atlantic, it created waves that could cover the Statue of Liberty 3 times. It also destroyed an island more than 30 miles away. The volcano behind this real-life Michael Bay scene was called Fogo, located on, you guessed it, Fogo Island. This island is basically just a whole single volcano that rose from the sea thanks to a magma hotspot, a place in the ocean where a lot of magma escapes and erupts like an underwater volcano. Over time, this magma cooled and stacked up like pancakes until, voila, after 7 major eruptions, the island popped out of the ocean like it was playing peekaboo. Surprise, it's a volcano. But Fogo's dramatic entrance was also a ticking time bomb. You see, the more a volcano grows, the heavier it gets, and if there's not enough magma inside it to support it, the whole thing can just collapse. Sometimes it doesn't take much. A minor earthquake, some erosion, or just a poor foundation made of soft sediment can trigger a collapse. It's like a really tall guy trying to balance over a bunch of marbles. Fogo had all the bad luck ingredients: too tall, too heavy, and built on squishy ground. And it gets worse. As the volcano grows heavier, it starts squishing the magma underneath. That lava can't rise, so it just simmers down there, slowly thickening like soup left on a burner for too long. Gases build up, pressure increases, and eventually, kaboom! It's the volcanic version of eating too many burritos and then trying to hold in a sneeze. This massive pressure and imbalance can trigger what's called a flank collapse, which is science speak for oops, half the volcano just fell into the ocean. That's what happened with Fogo. Most of the volcanic islands that form this way are long gone, but Fogo is still very much alive and kicking. In fact, it last erupted in 2014, and considering that it goes off every 20 years, maybe don't travel to Fogo Island in around 2034. For the longest time, scientists believe only big, bulky volcanic islands could collapse like this. But new research says that even smaller, skinnier guys, like the Danny DeVitos of the island world, aren't safe either. The thing is that small volcanic islands only seem stable because of their small mass. It's like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger both slipping on the ice. Arnie's fall might cause more chaos, but Danny can still go flying. And those little collapses? Yes, they matter. Take Santa Maria, a tiny island that's about 170 times smaller than Hawaii. It has collapsed multiple times, not because it wanted to, but because it's basically standing on soggy breadcrumbs. Its foundation is loose marine sediment, and to make things worse, it's sitting right next to the East Azores Fault, where 3 tectonic plates meet up for daily slap fights. This fault is responsible for many earthquakes and even some tsunamis that happened in Lisbon in the past, so you can imagine what it's like living right above it. Every time the volcano in Santa Maria erupts and grows, it also sinks. But when a chunk collapses, it bounces back up like a buoy. This seamount to island again roller coaster means that Santa Maria has popped in and out of the ocean like a submarine playing peekaboo. And with every peak comes a potential tsunami. Another volcano with similar trust issues is Pacaya, located in Guatemala. Between 2011 and 2013, scientists spotted strange movements in the soil, tiny shifts that suggested something underneath was getting restless. Sure enough, in 2014, Pacaya erupted. Luckily, it didn't collapse, but that risk still looms, especially if magma gets trapped in it like it did with Fogo. The consequences could be explosive, literally. In fact, about 1,000 years ago, Pacaya experienced a collapse that sent debris avalanches more than 15 miles away. Since then, it's rebuilt itself like a fiery phoenix, but it could still crumble again. That's why volcanologists obsess over the tiniest wobbles. It's not paranoia if the mountain really might fall. Now you might be thinking here, okay, but that was the past. Surely that kind of ridiculous mega tsunami collapse can't happen again, right? Well, welcome to the 21st century. Islands like Hawaii, La Palma in Spain, and various parts of the Caribbean are sitting on the same kind of geological whoopee cushions. All it takes is the right combo: loose foundation, steep slopes, maybe some trapped magma, and boom, flank collapse. In fact, it's already happened recently. In 2018, Anak Krakatau, the volcanic baby of the infamous Krakatoa, lost a big chunk of itself during an eruption. It caused a tsunami, but it was more awkward than devastating, like a volcano losing its pants on stage. Embarrassing, but survivable. But that's just amateur hour compared to history's real showstoppers. Ritter Island's 1888 collapse was so intense that the island literally got shorter. It went from being more than 2,000 feet tall to a mere 460 feet. But the record holder is the legendary Latua Bay megasplash from 1958, where a 7.8 magnitude earthquake triggered a massive landslide that sent a wave taller than the Empire State Building roaring through Alaska at highway speeds. Strangely enough, only 5 people lost their lives here, but on the other hand, The destruction path it left behind can still be seen today, all the way from space. Melting glaciers and ice caps can make volcanoes collapse too. When they melt, there's a sudden decrease in pressure on Earth's crust that can destabilize entire volcanoes. It's called isostatic rebound. It's like suddenly yanking a chair out from under someone who's been sitting still for centuries. Whoops. Also, here's something you probably never thought you'd worry about on your island getaway. Some volcanic islands grow outward as lava pours into the sea, creating unstable platforms known as lava deltas. These deltas can collapse without warning, taking newly formed land, and sometimes tourists too, right back into the ocean. No pressure though, just thought, maybe you want to stay off steaming new land. So yeah, next time you're lounging on a beachy volcanic island thinking, wow, this place is paradise, just remember, it might also be a ticking geological time bomb with a flair for the dramatic. From ancient mountain-sized cannonballs to surprise lava deltas, volcanoes have a history of keeping things spicy. It was in the year 2014 when a satellite snapped a picture of something unusual in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was a giant, almost perfect ring floating all by itself. It was an eerie sight. This formation showed up thousands of miles southwest of Hawaii and was about 280 miles wide. Who created this ring? How did it appear there? The questions were countless. The huge ring was spotted by NASA's Terra satellite with the help of a special camera called MODIS. Later, after examining the images, scientists realized that the ring was made out of perfectly shaped clouds. Even though clouds like this aren't super rare, it's not common to see one that big and completely on its own. Normally, such clouds show up in groups, not just hanging out solo in the middle of nowhere. The ring is made of puffy cumulus clouds. It turned out that it had been shaped by something called a Rayleigh-Bernard convection cell. It's a fancy schmancy way of saying that the clouds formed when warm air rose and cooler air sank, creating a circular pattern. Now, there are two types of such cloud cells. One is a closed cell, where cold air sinks around the edges and clouds pop up in the middle. The other is an open cell, where cold air sinks in the center and clouds form around the outside. And that giant ring floating over the ocean was exactly a closed cell, hence its cool shape. Interestingly, such cloud patterns usually look like a bunch of hexagons packed together, like a beehive in the sky. But this one was out there all by itself, which made it even more eye-catching. Now let's take a look at how the ring's formation happened in detail, shall we? At one point, the sun heated up the water or land, warming the air above it. That warm air got lighter and started rising. Cumulus clouds formed. Maybe it even rained a bit. When that rain came down, it cooled the air beneath the clouds. That cooler air then sank and spread out in all directions. But when it ran into the surrounding warmer air, it pushed the warm air upward again. That's how the ring of clouds formed around the original spot. This whole thing happened just south of the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a region near the equator where trade winds meet and often cause thunderstorms and heavy rain. That particular location probably helped with the formation of this cool cloud pattern too. Now, take a look at the right side of the satellite image. The ocean looks super shiny there, almost like silver. That shiny effect is called sun glint. It happens when sunlight reflects directly off the ocean's surface and hits a satellite camera just right. It kind of turns the sea into a ginormous swirling mirror. The cool thing is that the texture of the water, whether it's smooth or choppy, changes how that sun glint looks. Most of the time, the wind stirs up the surface, creating waves. These waves normally scatter the sunlight in different directions. But some of that light still hits the satellite, so the area looks shiny. But sometimes, if the water is super calm or there's a break in the wave pattern, it can create darker patches where less light gets reflected back. It gives sun glint zones a strange, patchy look. So if you notice really dark spots in satellite images, keep in mind that they might not be shadows or oil spills. Most likely, they're just signs of how the wind and waves are behaving on the surface of the ocean. Now, at the same time, it's not just weak winds that can smooth out the water. According to an oceanography professor from the University of South Florida, other stuff like freshwater, ship wakes, and even natural ocean movement, such as underwater waves or currents, can change the water's texture too. And all these phenomena can mess with how the sunlight reflects, which, in turn, can cause weird patterns in the images. Some of the darker lines you can see, for example, inside places like Delaware Bay or Chesapeake Bay, might be freshwater mixed with things like algae, dissolved plant material, or even natural oils. But those patches aren't usually as big as the giant dark blob they saw off Delmarva. It happened on May 6, 2023, when the ocean just east of the Delmarva Peninsula was super calm. There was barely any wind. So the surface of the water was all smooth and glassy like a giant mirror, and the angle was just right to make it look dark. Now, even though these sunglint effects make for some stunning satellite pictures, they can be annoying for scientists who are trying to study the color of the ocean or track things like phytoplankton blooms. Basically, sunglint can cover up the stuff they actually want to see. So, to work around that, scientists and engineers have built tools to either fix the data afterward or design sensors that avoid the glare in the first place. For example, the new Ocean Color instrument on NASA's upcoming PACE mission is designed to tilt just enough to dodge the worst of the sun's reflection. Oh, by the way, NASA scientist Ralph Kahn reminds us that our eyes can deceive us, judging brightness based on what's around it. So even a dark patch in an image might actually be pretty bright. It just looks dark compared to the shiny parts nearby. Now, let's tilt our heads back to the night sky. See that weird glowing spiral? Looks pretty extraterrestrial, doesn't it? Well, chances are it was just a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket doing its thing. When these rockets launch satellites into orbit, they sometimes dump leftover fuel once they're high up in the atmosphere. That fuel freezes and starts spinning around as the rocket moves. It looks like a mini ice tornado in space. But what makes it look even crazier is sunlight. Even if it's dark where you are, the rocket's way up high where the sun can still hit it. The light reflects off the icy fuel spiral, making it glow. Just a bit of night sky drama, but nothing mysterious. Now, let's admit it, you aren't likely to see a real-life flying saucer. What you can see, though, is a lenticular cloud, which looks pretty much the same if you ask me. These clouds pop up high in the sky, usually around mountains, where moist air flows over them just right. Even though the wind is moving super fast, these clouds just kind of hang there, totally still, like someone has parked them there. They're usually perfectly shaped, smooth, and saucer-like. And still, it's just nature showing off again.
3, 2, 1.
Another kind of weird stuff you might see in the sky is space junk. When satellites stop working, a lot of them are just left behind, floating around. Eventually, they slow down because of atmospheric drag and start falling back to Earth. When they do, they light up the sky like massive fireballs. Sometimes it can last for nearly a minute. As the pieces burn up, the different materials they contain can create colorful streaks in the sky. And once in a while, chunks actually survive the trip and crash land on Earth. The leftover bits are often twisted and scorched, and they look so strange that people sometimes think they're wreckage of spaceships from another planet. But nope, just another piece of our own space clutter coming home. Now, look at this. A plane is flying straight toward the horizon and leaving behind a long contrail. You know, that artificial cloud from engine exhaust? And in some cases, it can look like something is falling from the sky. The wind can blow those trails wider, making the whole picture seem even more dramatic because it looks like smoke from a crashing object. Add in the red glow from a setting sun and, well, it looks like something is on fire and plummeting to Earth. Plus, if sunlight reflects off the bottom of the plane just right, it can look like there's a glowing core in the crashing cloud. But the giveaway is the speed, slow. Real falling objects, especially from space, zip across the sky at thousands of miles per hour. So if it's barely moving, it's probably just a plane. Nothing to worry about. Wink wink.
On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700, which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years. And since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700. But this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes. It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the US has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area, stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake. It's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top 70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia Fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and 1,000,000 times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake. The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
For millions of years, something has been lurking in the depths of the ocean. You can't see it, touch it, or map with sonar, yet it keeps entire species trapped where they are. Recently, scientists uncovered its victims, strange jellyfish cousins that look almost identical, except for one odd detail. One travels the world's oceans, the other is stuck in the Arctic, unable to escape. What blocks its way? It's not ice, not land, not even depth, something far stranger. Let's take a look at this mystery. The jellyfish in question belong to a subspecies with a pretty complicated and hard-to-pronounce name, so I won't. See? Anyway, they live very deep in the ocean, about 3,300 to 6,600 feet down. that's so deep that sunlight doesn't even bother showing up there. The strange thing is that some of these jellyfish have a little bump or knob on top of their umbrella-shaped body, and others don't. And this tiny difference decides their entire life story. Jellyfish with a knob are world travelers found across all oceans. Jellyfish without a knob are stuck in the Arctic, like they're grounded for life. To figure out what was going on, scientist Javier Montenegro and his team looked back at more than 120 years of jellyfish photos and sightings. Then they added in modern DNA testing. The results were curious. Genetically, the knobless and knob jellyfish in the Arctic were identical to knob species in the western Atlantic. In any case, this bizarre similarity aside, only the knobless jellyfish are trapped in the north. So, what's keeping them from leaving? It's not a giant underwater wall or a rocky barrier. Instead, scientists think the wall is biological or linked to geography. Just like something called the Wallace Line, nature's invisible border. So, imagine sailing on a boat in Indonesia, crossing from the island of Bali to the island of Lombok. It's only about 22 miles, not even enough for a long nap on deck. Once you're there, the beaches look the same, the weather feels the same, and the palm trees all sway the same way. But when you look at the animals, it feels like stepping into a different universe. Birds, mammals, even reptiles suddenly don't match what you just saw a short distance away. That invisible line dividing the two worlds is the very Wallace Line. The story began in 1859. Alfred Russel Wallace, a British naturalist, traveled through the East Indies. While hopping between islands, he noticed something that didn't make sense. On the western islands, like Borneo and Bali, the animals all look like they belong to Asia – monkeys, tigers, woodpeckers, the usual. But east, the animals seem to have come straight out of Australia. Marsupials, cockatoos, even kangaroo cousins. The two sides weren't blending at all. Wallace realized that a narrow stretch of water could act like a massive biological border. How could two islands, close enough to see across the water, host such different wildlife? The line is not just some quirk of nature, but the result of powerful geological forces. Between the islands, there are underwater trenches that have never dried up, even when ancient sea levels rose and fell. To the west, you can find the Sunda Shelf. That's an enormous sunken platform that once connected Asia to nearby islands. That's why Borneo, Sumatra, and Java are packed with Asian-style wildlife. To the east is the Sahel Shelf. It once linked Australia and New Guinea, helping Australian species spread. The Wallace Line slices right between these shelves. This part of the world, the Indo-Australian archipelago, is where four massive tectonic plates slam into each other. As the seas rose, animals became trapped on islands. When seas fell, some species made it across, but not so many. That's why two islands, separated by just a short boat ride, ended up with completely different ecosystems. The Wallace Line isn't some recent discovery. This invisible border has been messing with animals for millions of years. Now, back in the Pleistocene, when giant mammoths roamed our planet and the oceans were up to 400 feet lower, many of the islands in Indonesia were actually connected. Tigers and elephants could stroll from place to place without ever touching water. But even when sea levels dropped that much, Asia and Australia never linked up. There was always a stretch of really deep water between them, and that watery gap acted like an uncrossable wall. For more than 50 million years, it's been stopping animals from mixing, keeping Asia's lineup on one side and Australia's weird crew on the other. That middle zone of islands, the ones stranded between the two continents, is called Wallacea. Only animals that could swim, fly, or somehow make it across the open ocean managed to live there. Everyone else was stuck at home, no exceptions. As you see, there can be a logical scientific explanation for almost any phenomenon on Earth. Maybe we could find one of those poor trapped jellyfish. Apparently, the problem lies in the North Atlantic Drift. It's a warm current that flows up from the Gulf Stream. Scientists don't know exactly why, but something about this area blocks the knobless jellyfish. One theory claims that predators beyond the drift are too dangerous for these creatures. Another idea is that the knob itself somehow gives jellyfish an edge in survival, but no one really knows. For now, it's like an invisible border. Knob jellyfish pass, knobless jellyfish stay put. On the Pacific side of the Arctic, there's no need for a mysterious barrier. The Bering Strait already does the job. On average, it's only 165 feet deep, which is way too shallow for deep-sea creatures to get through. So these jellyfish, knob or no knob, can't escape south. And since we're back at the topic of animal life, let's speak a bit more about the weird fauna quirks of the Wallace Line, because animals are the easiest way to see this barrier in action. Birds, for example, often refuse to cross even the tiniest gaps of open water, so their species stop right at the line. Mammals are even stricter. Bats can cross because they fly, but larger land animals never made the jump. On the Australian side, it's all about marsupials like kangaroos and possums. You'll also find native rodents that settled there more recently. On the Asian side, you get a different cast: apes, elephants, tigers, cats, monkeys, rhinos. Sure, there are some oddball exceptions. Sulawesi, right in the middle of the divide, has macaques, pigs, and big-eyed little tarsiers. But overall, the split is obvious. Step off the boat, and the animal world changes completely. But then, what about plants? Well, they don't always follow the rules as neatly. Seeds can hitch rides on birds, float on water, or get blown by the wind. But even here, the Wallace Line shows up. Take eucalyptus trees, for example. They're as Australian as kangaroos. Almost no species make it across to Asia. There's just one exception, which somehow popped up on Sulawesi and the Philippines. That's the magic of the Wallace Line. Two islands can look the same climate, same forests, sometimes even close enough that you can see across the strait. But their animals are like night and day. And it's all because of an invisible border in the sea that's been in place for millions of years. Such discoveries might sound small, but they're important. They show us that there are still hidden boundaries in the ocean that humans don't understand. These invisible fences could explain how marine animals spread, evolve, and survive. As scientists put it, finding two different body shapes inside a single genetic family shows how little we know about jellyfish and other gelatinous creatures. As for the Wallace Line, even today, it stands as one of the most fascinating mysteries in biogeography. It reminds us that life doesn't always spread evenly. Sometimes, a short stretch of water can act like an uncrossable wall. There's a lot more mystery in the deep sea than we thought. Ocean waves can grow much bigger than we ever thought and be far more dangerous than we realized. People used to believe that waves only moved in two dimensions, just up and down, like when you draw them on paper. However, a recent study shows that waves are three-dimensional structures, able to move in different directions. This finding indicates that the ocean is more complex than we imagined, and today's ships, wind farms, oil rigs, and other structures near the coast might not be ready for what is coming. First things first, waves break. It might seem obvious, but the truth is that we don't fully understand how and why that happens, and don't know all the steps involved. What we do know is that when waves break, they change shape and become steeper. To better understand this process, researchers initially assumed that waves were two-dimensional. This assumption was necessary because it made it easier to study waves, whether in theory or through computer simulations and experiments. But here's the thing. Saying that waves are two-dimensional doesn't really capture what ocean waves are like. When most people think about waves, they imagine typical, non-threatening waves you see at the beach. But the ones we're talking about here happen in open water and form when waves coming from all different directions meet up. This wild meeting occurs under certain conditions at the ocean, like in a spot where two seas meet, or when winds suddenly change direction, like during a hurricane. When waves from two different directions come together, it creates this three-dimensional wave. To test how these unique waves behave and how they could make the ocean more dangerous for us, two researchers built a special tank, like a giant swimming pool, measuring 82 feet wide and 6.5 feet deep. All around this tank, they installed 168 mechanical paddles. These paddles act like giant hands, pushing the water back and forth to create waves, just like you would if you moved your hand through water in a bathtub. Stop the video and go do that right now. No, wait, I'm kidding. Anyways, the paddles can generate waves of varied sizes and shapes. Plus, they absorb incoming waves so that they don't bounce around the pool and mess up the tests. Beneath the tank, they put 28 huge fans that push water across the tank to simulate ocean currents, mimicking how ocean water moves. Altogether, they circulate around 2,400,000 liters of water in the tank. All of this was done to create a kind of mini-ocean, controlled by some really cool technology. Great! Everything was set, and it was time to test. The experiment has shown us that three-dimensional waves can become twice as steep as two-dimensional waves before breaking. Let me explain. So, the normal waves you see on the beach break when they reach a very steep angle. They have a limit, a maximum steepness, if you will. When that limit is crossed, the wave breaks. So, what this study is telling us is that waves in the open ocean can get as much as 80% steeper than this limit before they start breaking. That also means they can get almost twice as high as normal waves before they start to break. But the researchers found something else that was interesting. Normally, when a wave breaks, it creates a white cap, that foamy part you see on top, and once it breaks, it's done. There's no going back. It's lost its energy. But when these multi-dimensional waves break, there is no white cap. They can only keep growing. That happens because the wave's energy isn't just concentrated in one direction, allowing waves to continue growing even after reaching the steepness limit when they're supposed to break. It's like these three-dimensional waves can redistribute energy and continue building up in the middle of the ocean. That means that together, these waves can grow 4 times steeper and larger than what we previously thought was possible. So, we are talking about bigger, massive waves that can suddenly appear in the middle of the ocean. It sounds scary to say the least. That's why, for our own safety, it's important to understand how this phenomenon occurs. Maybe buildings and homes along the beach aren't at such high risk from this. But these giant waves can pose a bigger threat to things that are in the middle of the sea, like oil rigs, wind farms, and boats. This finding raises significant questions about whether these constructions, as we design them today, are safe and could handle such extreme wave patterns. The thing is, sailors have been trying to warn us about this for centuries. In the 19th century, a French explorer named Jules Dumont d'Urville, I gave it a shot. He reported seeing rogue waves over 100 feet high during his voyages. Even though he was very experienced and respected, plus 3 other people confirmed that it had indeed happened, his story was discredited. Like this account, all other stories about massive and wild waves in the middle of the ocean were dismissed as myths, just tales sailors told to make their adventures sound more exciting. Hey, don't we all? Scientists only started taking these reports seriously in 1995, when a rogue wave was finally measured for the first time. The terrifying event happened at a gas platform in the North Sea, about 100 miles off the coast of Norway. The structure was built to withstand a wave of 64 feet, and even then, they thought a wave that big would only happen once every 10,000 years. But they definitely weren't ready for what happened on New Year's Day, when a monstrous 85-foot wave, 21 feet taller than predicted, hit the platform. In a more recent case from 2018, 8 men were on a 61-foot fishing vessel over 400 miles northeast of Hawaii's Big Island when they suddenly got hit by a pair of rogue waves. One hit the back of the boat, and the other slammed into the side. It was too much to handle. A lot of water came over the top, flooding the boat and pulling it down to the depths. The crew had to abandon the ship and get into a lifeboat immediately. Thankfully, they were all rescued with no injuries at all. These are just a few examples showing that our current oil platforms and ships might not be prepared for massive rogue waves. That's why experts suggest that one solution could be for ship designers to make ships strong enough to withstand double the significant wave height. However, they'd probably need some convincing because of the increased costs. So, here is a pretty convincing fact. It's believed that between 2011 and 2018, 210 waves of this type were recorded around the world, but it's very likely that the real number is much higher. What triggers rogue waves is still somewhat of a mystery, but we know they are not caused by movement on the seabed. Instead, they seem to be more related to bad weather. In Tampa Bay, for example, most rogue waves come in from the west, especially when it's stormy or windy. But we can't say this is the main cause everywhere in the world, as experts believe there could be several other factors at play. What is really concerning is that rogue waves can strike without warning. The open sea can be completely calm when suddenly the whole scene turns into a fight for survival. So, can we actually predict this phenomenon? It looks like we can. In a very recent study, researchers created a computer system that uses measurements from buoys to predict unusually large waves 5 minutes before they happen. It can catch about 3 out of 4 rogue waves. While the system does have some false alarms, the researchers say that from a safety standpoint, knowing a rogue wave might happen is better than not knowing. And I think we can all agree on that. A tsunami hitting major cities on or near the Mediterranean Sea and in the northeastern part of the Atlantic Ocean is not a matter of if, but when. It is scary and surreal to think that places like Cannes or Barcelona could suddenly get slammed by a huge wave, but the fact is, European coastlines are in active tectonic areas. Only about 10% of all tsunamis worldwide happen in the Mediterranean, and there have been at least 290 tsunamis in this area since 1600 before Common Era. Despite the relatively low number, this phenomenon has caused numerous devastating disasters throughout Europe's history. Back in 1755, an estimated 8.5 magnitude earthquake with an epicenter southwest of Cape St. Vincent triggered a tsunami that destroyed most of Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. About 40 minutes after the earthquake, this massive wave just slammed into the harbor in downtown, racing up the Tagus River. The phenomenon was so fast that several people on horseback had to gallop to higher ground to avoid getting carried away. And this was just the beginning of a nightmare, with 2 more terrifying waves hitting Lisbon right after. A disaster like this is similar to what we see in the Pacific Ocean several times a century, but in the Atlantic, it's very rare. This type of major tsunami is expected to happen every 3 to 5 centuries, but now it could happen tomorrow. Marseille in France, Chipion in Spain, and other cities are on the list of important locations that could be flooded soon, with a roughly 100% chance of being hit by a tsunami in the next 30 years. Statistics show that the wave will probably be more than 3 feet high. I know, it doesn't sound like much, especially since when we think about tsunamis, we imagine terrifyingly tall waves, like the one that hit Lituya Bay in Alaska. In that case, the wave was over 1,700 feet tall. But we must remember that even waves only 19 inches high can be dangerous to swimmers, because it's not the height of the tsunami that matters, but also the flow and movement of the water. Not to mention the flooding, which can damage beaches, harbors, and streets. If the coastline has a small harbor and the waterfront is exceptionally low, like Cannes, this natural disaster might be much more dangerous. Tsunamis around 6 feet high can lift cars off the ground, while smaller waves can create walls of water traveling at 40 miles per hour. Plus, there are these smaller events that might not wreck everything, but still can cost a ton of money. For example, large sandbars that move around on the ocean floor, like sand dunes shifting in deserts. They can mess up pipelines or deep-sea cables for internet and communications, and that ends up costing businesses and governments millions of dollars. That's why organizations like UNESCO are worried about the possibility of a dangerous tsunami hitting Europe soon. So they're doing everything they can to prevent apocalyptic scenarios, like what happened in 2004 when an earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, caused waves over 100 feet high in coastal communities, resulting in over 200,000 lives lost. And let's not forget about 2011, when an earthquake off the coast of Tohoku, Japan, triggered a tsunami that reached about 6 miles inland and caused a major nuclear accident at a power station along the coast. Over 16,000 people lost their lives in that tragedy, and the event resulted in billions of dollars in infrastructure damage. These disasters were huge wake-up calls, and we've come a long way since 2004. We're much safer today, largely because the tsunami warning system is highly effective at quickly detecting this dangerous situation. Unlike many other natural phenomena, a tsunami can be anticipated. We may only have a few minutes to act, but if we all know what to do, many lives can be saved. And in most parts of the world, sirens are commonly used to alert people to tsunamis. To sound the siren as early as possible, initial tsunami alerts usually rely only on seismic data. First, specialists receive information about an earthquake. Seismic waves travel about 100 times faster than tsunamis, so they have enough time to analyze the data and see if the earthquake might have generated a tsunami and whether they should issue an initial tsunami alert. At U.S. warning centers, for example, scientists typically issue initial alerts within 5 minutes of an earthquake. If a tsunami is suspected, these alerts may also include information about wave arrival times, recommended actions, and potential impacts. But sounding the alarm is not enough. To save lives, coastal communities also need to be trained to respond fast and in the best way possible. That's why UNESCO produced this program called Tsunami Ready, aiming to train people living in coastal areas at risk on how to act in case of a tsunami event by the year 2030. The idea is to help communities stay safe by teaching them how to protect their livelihoods and safeguard their homes. Being recognized as tsunami ready by UNESCO doesn't mean a community is tsunami proof, of course. It's more like a recognition that they have adopted all possible measures to mitigate tsunami risks. So authorities are helping communities to prepare themselves by installing evacuation signs, establishing security procedures, and creating plans to warn tourists. Like Spain, which distributed tsunami warning signs along the entire coastline, as well as signs showing evacuation routes to higher ground. And Spain better be prepared. I mean, only 7 tsunamis have hit the country since the year 365, so it's difficult to predict the effects of such an event. But they could be devastating, considering that Spanish coastal areas are so economically important. There's also a danger zone in the Averroes Fault, beneath the Barents Sea. If an earthquake happens at this point, people will have only 21 minutes to escape a tsunami. UNESCO has also established 12 tsunami warning centers, which cover Europe as well. This initiative involves 5 centers located in the Mediterranean and Northeast Atlantic regions. These centers can save thousands of lives because they monitor ocean disturbances 24/7. Then, after analyzing the threat, they send out messages based on the event's potential to cause a tsunami. The intensity scale ranges from no effect to completely devastating. And by that, they understand that nearly all brick buildings could be demolished by waves, and even the most reinforced concrete structures could suffer heavy damage. Now, so far, we have mostly talked about tsunamis caused by earthquakes along converging tectonic plate boundaries. In fact, earthquakes have accounted for over 80% of tsunamis since 1900. But tsunamis can also result from landslides, volcanic eruptions, and even meteorite impacts. Experts are also worried that with the current changes in climate, we might see more of meteotsunamis popping up in the Mediterranean. These ones are triggered by freaky weather conditions and can mess with any coastline that's got a shallow seafloor. They might not be as huge or famous as the earthquakes ones, but they can still cause significant property damage and put people in danger. For instance, in 2006, a meteotsunami struck the harbor of Ciutadella on the Spanish island of Menorca. Yachts were tossed into each other and later stranded on the harbor floor as the water receded, resulting in tens of millions of euros in damage. Unfortunately, meteo tsunamis in the Mediterranean tend to be stronger during summer, so if you're planning to spend your vacation in Europe, stay alert for any signs of dangerous waves. If you suddenly encounter a tsunami moving in your direction, remember this is the time to react. Move to higher ground as far inland as possible. Pay special attention to any emergency alerts and information, and follow the guidance of local authorities. Most importantly, do not wait around taking photos. Leave the area as soon as you notice any signs of this danger event, or if you hear an official tsunami warning. Hey, stay safe. In November 2020, a wave the height of a 4-story building was recorded off the coast of Vancouver Island, Canada. The team at Marine Labs, the company that operates the buoy that got caught in it, couldn't believe the data they saw. Everything was normal, then, unexpectedly, a vast force came, pulled the buoy down, and then sent it up to a peak before taking it even deeper. The probability for such a huge wave to form is once in 1,300 years, so they had to be sure it wasn't a technical mistake. Marine Labs sent the data to a rogue wave scientist at the University of Vancouver. They analyzed and validated the findings and shared them in February 2022. The wave officially became the most extreme rogue wave ever officially recorded, as it was 3 times the height of waves around it. Luckily, this giant didn't leave any damage, as it happened too far offshore. For centuries, rogue waves were believed to be real only in the stories of sailors. Christopher Columbus himself mentioned a rogue wave, but back then, it wasn't officially a thing. In August 1498, he was on his 3rd expedition to the Americas. As they were passing through a strait near Trinidad, a huge wave lifted the boats. They managed to survive and continue the journey, and the area is still known as the Mouths of the Dragon, named this way by Columbus. Back in 1826, a French scientist and naval officer was crossing the Indian Ocean on his ship, the Astrolabe. They got caught in a terrible storm and witnessed several waves over 80 feet tall. One of them was the height of a 10-story building. The crew lost one of its members, but the 4 of them, including the captain, made it to land and spread the story of the gigantic waves. But back then, scientists were sure waves couldn't be taller than 30 feet. So everyone took this story as a tale. Witnesses shared many other stories of giant waves coming out of nowhere, but scientists officially recognized the first rogue wave only in 1995. It went down in history as the Doppler wave, or the New Year's wave. This sea monster of the North Sea hit the Norwegian gas platform Dropner on New Year's Day. It reached a height of 84 feet. The waves surrounding it were twice as small. The rig was built to withstand waves up to 64 feet tall and had the most advanced sensors for its time. It became a sensation in the scientific world because it wasn't like any other type of wave they'd studied before. So they gave rogue waves an official definition. It's a wave more than twice as tall as others around it. These bad boys, also known as freak waves, monster waves, and episodic waves, can pop up lightning fast in a stormy sea or show up out of nowhere in calm waters. They have steep sides and a deep trough below, and look like a wall of water rising out of the sea. They're so intense that they can even swallow up rescue helicopters just trying to do their job. Rogue waves aren't the same as tsunamis. Tsunamis happen when there's a big shift in water, like an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or landslide. They mess with the entire water column. At sea, you might not even notice a tsunami cruising beneath you, but near the shore, as it hits shallow waters, those waves can shoot up to crazy heights. Rogue waves are formed at the surface level, although sometimes they can form deep below, and these are called rogue internal waves. Scientists and sailors singled out some statistics. Rogue waves more often form when wave trains run into fast ocean currents. The coast of South Africa is one good place for that. There are concerns that these water beasts may happen more often in the future because there's more energy in the atmosphere and ocean. It means larger and more frequent rogue waves and more ships lost at sea. Rogue waves aren't limited to oceans and can even occur in lakes. Lake Superior witnesses something that got the name Three Sisters. It's a series of 3 large waves, one after another. The second wave covers the ship decks before the first one is gone. The third wave jumps in and adds extra water. These 3 sisters overload the ship. There's a theory that this phenomenon took down the steamship Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. Rogue waves are also dangerous because they form rogue holes in the water. When the wave builds up, it draws in all the water around it. So, near the base, these holes can be very deep. If the bow or stern of a ship ends up in one, the ship can instantly sink. Some oceanographers believe that rogue waves are to blame for the disappearance of ships in the notorious Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic Ocean. Storms from several directions converge in this mysterious area, so rogue waves are more likely to gain force here. And because they can reach a height of 100 feet, they can theoretically bring down an airplane, not just ships. There are 2 main theories trying to make sense of how rogue waves happen. First up, we've got the linear addition theory. Imagine waves cruising through the ocean at their own speeds. Now, when these waves cross paths, they team up and become stronger, cooking up a rogue wave. Then there's the nonlinear focusing theory. It says waves like to roll in groups, and when they spend time together, they share some energy. Sometimes, this energy exchange turns into a rogue wave. To predict the formation of these freaky waves, scientists would need an innovative radar system to keep a constant eye on the waves near a boat. They'd collect all the data and toss it into a fancy math model that paints a real-time picture of what the ocean surface looks like at that very moment. This model would need to do new calculations of the surface situation every 5 minutes. It would let the crew know if there were any extreme waves coming up in the next several minutes. Such a system doesn't exist yet, but as scientists measure more rogue waves, mathematicians may find a way to alert us of the upcoming rogue waves rising out of the water. Sometimes you can hear the term sneaker wave as a synonym for rogue waves, but oceanographers claim there's a difference. Rogue waves occur mostly in the ocean, and sneaker waves build up at the shore. They're also known as king waves and sleeper waves, and they roll up much faster than usual waves when they approach the beach. They always appear without warning after smaller waves and can be powerful. They can carry swimmers further away into the ocean. But the worst part is, they can also sweep you off your feet and into the water when you're casually strolling on a jetty or the beach, or on an outcropping nearby. Oregon State University researchers found that sneaker waves form in offshore storms that carry wind energy to the ocean surface. With all that energy, several waves unite and overlap into one beast that stands higher and goes further ashore than a regular wave. Another thing that makes them more dangerous is that, just like rogue waves, they're hard to predict. Fishers, surfers, and others who spend a lot of time by the water normally know when and what to escape when it comes to big waves. With sneaker waves, that logic doesn't work. There is no set time of the year when they're more active either, but putting together some data shows you're more likely to experience one of those somewhere between April and October, and the peak would be in October and November. Sneaker waves carry huge amounts of water, sand, and gravel. Those can fill up your shoes in a matter of seconds and sweep you off your feet if you're unlucky enough to be ashore at that moment. These sea monsters also have the power to move huge logs, which carries another hazard. So, some scientists drilled through the seafloor off the U.S. East Coast only to find more water. But this time, it's the kind of water we can actually drink. And that's a big deal, because this new freshwater reservoir could supply a metropolis the size of New York City for the next 800 years. Now, the team is confused. They're trying to figure out how a giant freshwater system ended up under the ocean, and, more importantly, how it stayed hidden from us for over 20,000 years. Okay, to be fair, scientists have suspected there's fresh water under the seafloor since the late 1960s. But only recently, researchers actually got on a boat to follow up on those reports. They named the mission Expedition 501, and they had one goal: drill to the bottom of the ocean and see what was really hiding down there. So those scientists drilled about 1,300 feet down off the coast of Massachusetts. And once they got that deep, they hit a thick layer of sediment that was basically soaked with fresh water. Now, that freshwater layer sat below this saltier sediment, and above it, there was a tight lid made of clay and silt, material that doesn't really let water pass through. This seal is strong enough to keep the two layers separated. So, up top, you got seawater, and down below, fresh water. The drilling process took about 3 months. In that time, they pulled up 13,200 gallons of water from 3 different spots beneath the seafloor, just off Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. They're still analyzing the results, but early reports suggest this reservoir might be much bigger than they previously thought. It could stretch from offshore New Jersey all the way north to Maine. Now, despite its size, it did a pretty good job hiding from us. Now, scientists are trying to figure out when and how this reservoir was formed. And back in 2003, one study suggested fresh water could get trapped under the ocean in at least 3 different ways. Theory number 1. Tall mountains near the ocean can funnel rainwater straight down from higher elevations and into the seabed. Theory number 2. A hidden reservoir can form if sea levels stay very low for a long time and rainwater seeps into the ground. Then, when sea levels rise again over hundreds of thousands of years, that fresh water can get trapped in the sediment underneath. And theory number 3, which is connected to the one before, is that a freshwater reservoir can form under the ocean when ice sheets grow and sea levels drop. At the bottom of the ice sheet, the ice slides over solid rock, known as bedrock. As the ice scrapes and grinds against this rock, it creates heat, which melts some of the ice. That melted water collects at the base of the ice sheet. Then, because the ice is extremely heavy, it pushes the water down into the ground. Over time, the water gets trapped under layers of sediment. Well, more than 20 years later, scientists are finally close to an answer. The mountain theory is basically ruled out here because of the geography of New England. There are no large high mountain ranges right next to the coast. But the glacier theory could make sense. Their hypothesis is that the fresh water in this reservoir came from glaciers at some point during the last ice age, which lasted from about 2.6 million to 11,000 years ago. Still, it's not a final answer. The team is now studying the reservoir in much more detail. They're still analyzing things like microbes, rare earth elements, and the pore space in the sediment. All of that can help researchers estimate the reservoir's size more precisely. The age of the sediments can also narrow down when exactly it formed, and knowing its origin will help reveal how those systems have evolved over time. We just have to wait a little longer. But one thing is certain, there really is fresh water under the ocean. And when you think about that, it's hard not to wonder, wouldn't some salt get mixed in? And yeah, that can happen. So let's take a look at the map. Here's the reservoir. The farther you go from the coast, the saltier the water gets, and that doesn't matter much to us because it's not safe to drink anyway. But the closer you get to the coast, the less salt there is. The drill site closest to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard showed that out of every 1,000 parts of water, only 1 part is salt, so it's considered safe. You can drink it, cook with it, and take a bath in it. But why does all of this actually matter? Well, because fresh water is becoming a big problem around the world. I mean, the lack of it. A new United Nations report talks about a global water bankruptcy. They say we've hit a new and pretty worrying stage. More and more river basins and underground water sources, called aquifers, can't go back to their historical normal. Droughts and shortages are becoming more permanent, completely changing what life looks like in some places. For example, the Aral Sea. This was once the world's 3rd largest lake and looked like this back in the 1980s. And this is how it looks today. It's completely dried out. It's not just there. More than half of the world's large lakes have lost water since the early 1990s. And Central Europe has lost 39% of its glacier ice in little over 20 years. So even now, over 1 billion people around the world still don't have access to fresh water. And estimates say that in just 5 years, demand will be 40% higher than supply. That's why this finding is such a huge deal. It doesn't mean we're about to start pumping water from under the ocean tomorrow. But it does mean we might have backup options in the future, especially for big coastal cities. That's exactly the goal of Expedition 501. And it's not just in the U.S. This group is part of a much larger international science program called the International Ocean Discovery Program, or IODP. Their goal is basically to drill deep into the seafloor to understand how Earth works, its climate, its geology, and in this case, its hidden water systems. This expedition came after decades of unanswered questions. Like we mentioned earlier, researchers had hints of fresh water under the seafloor for decades. Those hints came from strange electromagnetic signals and seismic data. But back then, the technology just wasn't good enough to confirm it. So the idea stayed on paper for a long time. Everything changed when modern drilling came into play. Expedition 501 literally drills straight down through the seafloor and pulls up sediment samples. And this process normally takes days to months. Is it safe, though? Well, they say the ship that carries the drilling rig follows international rules to protect the environment. They're also taking every precaution to make sure no solid or liquid material is dumped into the sea during the work. Their new finding off the East Coast is only the beginning. For now, it's the largest one of its kind. But scientists believe there may be still many hidden reservoirs out there around the world. Similar expeditions are planned or already happening near other parts of the world. Soon, scientists might find new reservoirs off the coasts of Indonesia, Australia, and even South Africa. So, Expedition 501 is basically about mapping these hidden freshwater reservoirs and finding out how they form, how stable they are, and whether we can protect them. Because, yeah, they still have a huge technical problem ahead, which is making sure the fresh water doesn't mix with the salty water above and below it. And that really matters if we ever want to use this water in the future, or avoid contaminating aquifers that already exist near the coast. So this expedition is pushing scientists to find answers to a pretty uncomfortable question. If fresh water gets harder and harder to find, what options do we really